Good evening. I declare this meeting of Port Phillip Council open and I welcome the members of the public that are here tonight. The City of Port Phillip respectfully acknowledges the Yalukit Willem clan of the Boonwurrung. We pay our respects to their elders, both past and present, and we acknowledge and uphold their traditional relationship to this land. Council has a local law that determines how this meeting will be conducted. There's a time allotted in tonight's agenda for public question time. During public question time, members of the public can ask specific questions on general matters other than those relating to a topic that's on the agenda for tonight. Members of the public are only to ask a specific question and shall not provide any statements or contextual comments relating to that question. Consequently, the official minutes of the meeting will only record the question asked and any response given. The number of questions that a member of the public may ask shall be at the discretion of the Chair. There's also an opportunity for members of the public to ask a question or make a comment on a specific item on tonight's agenda, and this will be done prior to Council considering the item. We encourage questions or comments from the public that are directed through the Mayor, are not defamatory, abusive or objectionable in language or substance, but rather are presented in a spirit of mutual respect of the Council and the community. And we ask all speakers to abide by the directions of the Chair. If you wish to ask a question or speak to a report, please complete the blue form that's available at the table just outside the chamber and hand it to a staff member. And I encourage you to limit your questions and comments to around 3 minutes and to avoid repeating any points that have been already made by other speakers. And please note, all council meetings are now being live streamed. Live streaming and recording allows the community to watch and to listen to meetings in real time, providing greater access to council decision-making and debate and improving openness and transparency. The live stream of this meeting is available on Council's website, Facebook Live, and the recording of this meeting will also be available to view a few days after the meeting on Council's website and also the YouTube channel. The cameras will film and record councillors at this meeting. However, care is taken not to film or record images of the members of the public. If a member of the public asks a question or makes a comment about an agenda item, they'll not be filmed, but their voice will be heard in the live stream and recorded. And please also note, in accordance with Council's local law, that this meeting cannot be filmed or audio taped unless permission is granted by the Mayor. In the unlikely event of an emergency evacuation, please follow the instructions of the Chief Warden. Okay, councillors, we'll go to the agenda now. First up, we've got item 1, apologies. Do we have any apologies?
Got one
Councillor
for you,
Simic.
Oh.
Councillor Brand is an apology tonight.
And I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Seconded.
Second, then I'll put that. All those in favour? That's carried. We'll move to item 2, the minutes of the previous meeting. Councillors, the minutes of the meeting, the ordinary meeting held on the 15th of August, have been circulated. Do you have any questions about those minutes? If not, can I have a motion?
Happy to move, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Gross to move and Councillor Baxter to second. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried. Now, councillors, we have an alteration to the order of the agenda tonight. So first up, we would normally go to, I'm just going to talk about item 15, which is on the agenda for tonight, which is a notice of motion. And I would like to bring forward a motion. Can I have a motion to bring forward item 15.2, which is notice of motion from Councillor Gross regarding Australia Day celebrations? Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Pearl to move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Gross to second. I'll now put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried. Councillor Gross, I understand that you no longer wish to move this motion at this meeting. Is that correct?
Correct. I wish to defer it.
Thank you. So given that's the case, we'll move on to the next item of business. Now, there's another item of business that there's been a request from the acting CEO to defer, and that is the car share report. Now, the car share report is item 10.2, which is listed here as emissions requirement for car share vehicles. Mr. Carroll, can you please explain why the officers have requested this to be deferred?
Through you, Madam Mayor. The report has generated a lot of questions amongst councillors. Officers have done their best today to respond to those questions, but in my view, we need to take some more time, reflect on the report and give the councillors an appropriate briefing and come back in due course.
Thank you. So, councillors, I would like to find a mover for deferring the car share report. Councillor Baxter to move, Councillor Simic to second. Then I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. The car share report will be deferred. And if any members of the public would like to speak to either one of those reports that have now been deferred or not progressed, you can have the opportunity in item 6, which is public question time. Even though you don't have to, but you can should you wish to. Not just yet, soon. So we're up to item 3 now, which is declarations of conflicts of interest. Councillors, are there any conflicts of interest to declare?
I've got one, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Pearl?
I, Councillor Marcus Pearl, declare that in relation to item 9.2, Children's Services Policy Draft Policy Objectives, that I have an indirect conflict of interest by close association in this matter.
Thank you, Councillor Pearl. And Councillor Gross?
I, Councillor Dick Gross, declare that in relation to item 9.1 Northport Oval Upgrade and Funding Agreement that I have an indirect conflict of interest by close association in this matter.
Thank you, Councillor Gross. So at 9.1, Councillor Pearl, I'll ask you to leave the chambers, and 9.2, Councillor... Oh, the other way round. I'll ask you to leave the chambers for consideration of those matters. Thank you. We'll move to item 4, which is petitions and joint letters. And councillors, we don't have any petitions or joint letters tonight. Item 5 is the sealing schedule, and we don't have any documents requiring sealing tonight either. So item 6 is the public question time. And we have 2, 4, 5 people that have requested to speak during public question time. So, and I notice 3 of them are for the notice of motion. So I'd ask Miss Deborah Holland, if you would come forward, please take a seat at the front here. Miss Holland, if I could ask you to pop on the microphone and you may speak. Welcome. Pop on the microphone, please.
Action replay. Woman Jika, everybody. Hi, I'd like to acknowledge the elders past, present and all our emerging elders on this country that we meet on here today, and also would like to acknowledge that this country has never been ceded with sovereignty. I'm here today because I'm quite a passionate community member. I reside here in St Kilda, and I am a proud grandmother of 4 beautiful grandchildren. And I'm very passionate about teaching my grandchildren truth-telling. So Australia Day to me is a day that has only been a public holiday since 1994. So it is a day that can be moved to another date that is not and will not offend our First Nation people. Excuse me for a minute. So I can speak on behalf of myself, and I have a lot of non-Aboriginal friends and Aboriginal people, and also Bunwan people that do not agree to celebrate Australia Day that marks the day of invasion. So, yeah, that's my views. And what I would like, the opportunity, if the City of Port Phillip could maybe have a survey to allow more residents to be aware, because I certainly wasn't aware of this motion that was set for tonight's agenda. And I think it's really important that we have a lot more transparency to allow residents here in the City of Port Phillip to know what is actually going on in council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms Holland. Lynette Austin, please. Welcome, Ms Austin.
Thank you. Firstly, too, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of where we gather here tonight and pay my respects to their elders past and present. We've just been invited to come down tonight. I'm a little bit tired, but because we had our rally on Parliament House yesterday in relation to redress compensation for stolen generation. I am a stolen generation survivor, been a long time stolen generation campaigner over 21 years plus since the Bring Them Home report was done, and and I've been asked to come by Lydia tonight, Lydia Thorpe, to come down with Auntie Rio, and we've always gone. I myself don't acknowledge Australia Day. I'm speaking just for myself. We call it Invasion Day, and so that's just how it is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms Rio Ellis, please. You don't want to speak?
No, the form, just to remind me of, because I had a few little dot points.
One of the blue forms?
One of the blue
I
forms
think
that
we
I
could
wrote.
probably find that for you.
Thank you.
Have a seat in the meantime. If you could just state your name, please, and your suburb.
I'm Rio Ellis. I'm from over in Preston, but I do have a lot of relatives over in Port Phillip area who wants me to talk on their behalf. As much as they love Port Phillip Council, they're sort of feeling a bit, left out, that other councils are taking on the fact that we don't want to celebrate Australia Day on the 26th, January 26th. But my question, I guess I'm listening to what you said, is just ask the question, is why was the motion deferred tonight, and was there any consultation to the Bunurong community?
Thank you. Councillor Gross, would you like to address that, since that is your motion?
Yeah, I did speak to Nawi Carolyn Briggs and also Dave Thompson, the archaeologist with the Bunurong, on the board of the Bunurong, and I withdrew it tonight because I thought it was appropriate that we just put it out there and then withdraw it so that people could converse about it and discuss it and support or get rid of it. So that's the history of it. The other thing I'd say is that this resolution was about doing some more consultation and conversation and research. So,
Thank you, Councillor Gross.
So yeah, it wasn't a final decision type of motion.
Yeah. I just, if I may, want to let you know that there's more than 2 people on the Bunurong Nation, and that's coming from about 20 or 30 people that have asked me to come along, and simply because my auntie lives in the area, she's too ill to come to council tonight. But in saying that was the question, and hopefully the consultation with the Bunurong community, not just 2 people, will go ahead.
Thank you very much.
No, I accept that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miss Allison. I note that you're talking about the Bunurong or the Boomerang? Both? Boomerang, yep. Thank you. Mia McGregor, please. Hello, Ms McGregor. If you could state your name and suburb, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Councillor Mia McGregor from the City of Maribyrnong Council. Good evening, Madam Mayor and Councillors.
Welcome,
and CEO.
fellow councillor.
I basically came tonight just to inform myself as to your policies and procedures and protocols and get a feeling for how you do things. But while I'm here, I'm taking the opportunity to ask a question about your policy around single-use plastics. I recently raised a motion at the City of Maribyrnong Council around the elimination or the investigation into the feasibility of eliminating single-use plastics in council venues and events. And I had 2 questions. One of them was, what is City of Port Phillip's policy around single-use plastics at council venues and events? And if you have taken any steps towards eliminating them, I would love to hear your thoughts on that process to date.
Thank you, Ms McGregor. Ms Rosick, are you... or both of you? Yep.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'll let my colleague, Mr Trail, answer the question about events and how we manage plastics in events. We're currently finalising the Council's Don't Waste It strategy, which deals with how we're going to manage waste as a city, and will be presented to Council on the 20th of September. 15% of plastics we know end up in landfill, and we have 3 outcomes that particularly deal with plastics. You'll be happy to hear. We promote a reduction of single-use plastics, plastic bags and coffee cups is one of the actions. The other ones include advocating to the government to ban use of non-recyclable items and packaging through product stewardship scheme, and we'll work with residents and businesses to kind of encourage the purchase of products that can be reused and have minimal packaging. So these will all be presented to Council, and Mr Trail will answer the other question.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. In regards to the events and our plastic policy, we update our policies every year regarding events. We've made some improvements to that policy, which we provide all event providers. I believe that's on our website, and we can provide you a copy of that if requested.
Great. Thank you very much.
And one more thing I might outline, our South Melbourne market is single-use plastic bag free. Wonderful. So, and that was done with over 90% approval from the market traders and also the members, the customers that use it. So it's actually been quite a big success that started in April. So
news of that spread to my city, so well done on that.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. And our last speaker at public question time is Mr James Woolett, please. Welcome, Mr Woolett.
Thank you. My name is James Woolett. I'm a resident of Middle Park. I speak on behalf of the members of the Middle Park Library Action Group. On March the 21st, you passed a motion to continue operating Middle Park Library as a library. Para 3.7 of that motion stated that Council implements increased library usage data collection across all libraries. Para 3.81 stated that Council realigns existing hours. Para 3.82 stated that Council improves signage. Para 3.83 stated that Council strengthens the children's collection. On June the 10th, Brenda Forbath received a letter from the Port Phillip CEO, Peter Smith, that stated, discussions to gather initial feedback from groups such as the kindergarten and toy library, as well as local schools, are being scheduled over the next week or two. Council, and went on to say, Council officers are still in the process of assessing options for improved data collection. We aim to have this in place by the beginning of the new financial year. The Middle Park Library Action Group is pleased to see that new signage has been installed and that an online survey on opening hours has just been completed. We assisted the library service by distributing 400 hard copies of its survey. But it is now 168 days since Council passed its March motion, and it is now 12 weeks since Ms Forbath received the CEO's letter. We would like to bring to Council's attention there has been no consultation with staff at the Civic Kindergarten, Middle Park Primary School and the Toy Library about opening hours. Our questions are, when can we expect to see the opening hours realigned? When will a functioning data collection system be installed? When will the children's collection be increased? The next meeting of the Middle Park Library Action Group is on Friday at 1:30 at the local community centre. Councillors and officials are welcome to attend if they wish to answer the questions then.
Thank you, Mr Willett. I'll ask Ms Jeffs, please, to address those questions.
Through you, Madam Mayor. So I'll take the questions on notice, but I commit to sending someone to the meeting on Friday and to answer your questions there, Mr Willett, and of course councillors would be welcome to attend as well.
They have done in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Willett. So, councillors, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. And prior to councillor question time, I would like, and pursuant to Council's meeting procedure local law, the acting CEO has requested, and I've given consent to, the adding of an agenda item, two agenda items actually. One to acknowledge the service given by Carol Jeffs, General Manager, Community and Economic Development, who has resigned to take up the role of CEO at Cardinia Shire Council, and to note the recent passing of Mirka Moira. So, councillors, I'm going to say a couple of words and then I'd like to invite you to as well, should you feel that you want to. So over 4 years, this council has had the incredible gift of you as part of our leadership team. And I want to thank you for all you have contributed. From your first day, when you were thrown into helping councillors decide on the future of St Kilda Festival, until today, which there was a mighty conversation you were thrown into, dealing with emergency at the Farrar Street School. You've been on your A game. Your leadership growth has been phenomenal, and your time here as acting CEO for near 6 months was very special to me in particular. Being mayor while you were acting CEO meant that I got to know you very well. You are an awesome wingman, dedicated, effective, and someone I certainly trust. Just like to wish you all the very best for your next big move as CEO of the Cardinia Shire, and we wish you every success and hope that you'll have some of the Port Phillip DNA goodness with you to plant in your growing municipality. Councillors, would anyone else like to say a few words? Councillor Gross.
Well, I'll have a go at matching your wonderful tribute. So, I encountered Carol after an election, so halfway through your term with us, and it's It's been fantastic to observe you and to benefit from your wisdom, your strength. You're not afraid to tell me when I'm wrong. I knew you'd be the one who'd say that. And I must say that I feel a degree of responsibility for your departure, given that I was approached by the Mayor and asked what did I think of Ms Jeffs, and I said, be fantastic, you couldn't go, couldn't do better, it'll be great for her, great for you. And I think you will be. It's a completely different part of Victoria, Melbourne, and I just wish you well, and I want to echo what the Mayor said in that I hope that your experience and time here will lead to an augmented and productive contribution to your new employer. I think it'll be great for them and you. Good luck.
Councillor Simic.
Thank you to members of the public for indulging us for this, but it is very important to acknowledge the incredible amount of work that a general manager does for our municipality and the big teams that they lead. We employ a huge amount of staff, and leadership comes from our CEO and our general managers. And Carol's leadership certainly been one that's been noted by many of the people that report to her as outstanding, someone that they can work with collaboratively, communicate with collaboratively, and have very clear leadership from. So on behalf of myself and other councillors, I'd also like to add my thanks for the leadership you've provided in guiding such a big team behind you to achieve some phenomenal outcomes for our municipality.
Councillor Baxter.
I don't want it to run on too much with councillors talking, but I did want to say that ever since I got onto council and I had met with and started talking a lot with the video game development community and wanted to see how much more we could help them. That there was basically just a large number of conversations where I was just saying to Carol, like, yeah, but like video games, and she was like, yeah, I know, I'm talking to them, and we actually did get to a point where we now have an excellent relationship, I think, with that entire industry, which is such a sort of powerhouse in our area, and I think that's largely due to the bridges that Carol and her department were building throughout that time. So, yeah, that's my little thing.
Councillor Crawford.
I'll keep it quick, as I always like to do. So, Carol, we are going to miss you, and the thing I'm going to miss you most for is your ability to cut through. When all of us have all these ideas or are contemplating a big problem and we can't see a strategy through, you are able to sit there, take it all in, and then bring us to a point and suggest a way through, or perhaps an approach, or ask the question that we've kind of all been scrambling to find in our brains about the issue. So I'm going to miss that clarity that you bring to the conversation around some really big strategic stuff that we're doing. So thank you, but I wish you the best of luck. They are lucky to have you.
Councillor Copsey.
You always have given incredibly thoughtful, considered, measured, strategic and really sensible advice. I've felt lucky to receive your advice as a councillor, and I feel our organisation has been really lucky to have your leadership. Cardinia's gain is definitely our loss, and I wish you all the best. You're going to be fantastic there. Thank you, Carol.
So we're going to miss you, but we think you're going to an awesome place. So congratulations. Now, councillors, I do have some flowers to give Miss Jeffs. So. And now the second item I wanted to do tonight was acknowledgement of Mirka Mora. Mirka passed away on Monday, the 27th of August 2018, after leaving an indelible impression on Australia and her long-time home of St Kilda. The Mora family chose to live in Melbourne after leaving Paris in 1951, with Mirka and her husband Georges surviving the horrors of the Holocaust. The couple soon became entrenched in Melbourne's art scene, and their restaurants, including Talano in St Kilda, becoming a focus of artistic life of the time. We have lost someone who has given so much to so many, not least to the people of Port Phillip. Mirka was a driving force in Victoria's art scene and has influenced the careers of many artists. The City of Port Phillip proudly holds several of her works in its arts collection, including a large mosaic work on the foreshore of St Kilda. Also, Mirka Lane, which runs off Barclay Street in St Kilda, was named after her. The road is located near her long-time home in St Kilda, which was always overflowing with artwork, friends and family. Mirka was a prolific artist, with her work extending beyond painting to include embroidery, mosaics, drawing and even doll making. Her artworks are featured in galleries nationally and throughout the world. Mirka's pieces are included among Victoria's best galleries, with one of her murals welcoming visitors to Flinders Street Station. Together, Mirka and Georges helped to colour our city in a bright new light. So therefore, councillors, I'd like to move the following motion, that council acknowledges the contribution of Mirka Mora has made to Victoria's art scene, and that council offers its sincere condolences to the family and friends of this wonderful person and artist. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Copsey to second. Would anyone else like to speak to this motion? If not, I'll put that motion. Councillor Pearl.
I didn't know her well. I met her for the first time probably 20, 25 years ago at a friend of mine's house who had some of her paintings. And one thing you realise with her, once you buy the painting, you also buy the relationship with her. And in that couple of hours I spent with her that night and subsequently is a person that had a huge amount of gift and talent, but she also saw the obligation to give that gift and talent as much as she possibly could to brighten up the lives of others or the causes of others of which she was passionate about. And that's something we can always take in terms of her ability to teach and pass a message on and a skill and a talent on to see what's good in the world and what's good in people. You can see that in her paintings and you can see that in her relationships with people. She saw what was good in the world. She focused on that, and she left our nation and our country and the universe a bit better off for her existence, and that's a core sign of success. So she'll be dearly missed, but it was a life well lived.
Thank you, Councillor Pearl. Then I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Now we'll move to item 7, which is councillor question time. Councillors, do you have any questions of the officers? Councillor Copsey.
My question follows on from the factory fire that was experienced in the last week out the west. We know that communities in the west were deeply impacted by that, but we've since been seeing impacts particularly around water and air quality that have spread further. I would like it if officers could provide an update on what work we are doing to understand the impacts to water and wildlife in particular. And in particular, I'm concerned, having seen dead fish washing up on the shores in Port Phillip Bay around my local beach, what we're doing to monitor particularly the health of the little penguin colony who may be feeding on contaminated fish at the moment and other wildlife in the area. I'd like to know, if possible, what we're doing to take advantage of the rich wealth of information that comes through to us from individuals and community organisations as well as government agencies.
Thank you. Mr Trail.
Yep. Through you, Madam Mayor. We've been following the instance of the fire with our emergency municipal teams. They work closely with other local governments and the EPA regarding that event and have been monitoring the water runoff from that fire. So it did fall into the yarra, and that was a watching brief for us in our role as municipal, watching that in case some water ran off into the bay. EPA have released a statement today online highlighting that they've been monitoring the water in the bay, and a quote directly from their press release today is The good news is after 4 days of monitoring the northern beaches of Port Phillip Bay, we've seen no signs that the water quality has been affected from that incident. There is ongoing management with dead fish in the river that we will need to monitor regarding that. In regards to the penguin colony, just managing that, we work closely with Parks Victoria. Our foreshore coordinator is the key contact point to work with community members, Earth Care and Parks Victoria. We've worked on that with any developments with Kilda Pier, and we also work with them with incidents that happened over the last couple of years. So we do have a good working relationship regarding that important asset to the municipality.
Thank you, Mr Trail. Councillor Simic?
Just to follow up on that, and thank you for that explanation. If the EPA is indeed saying that the water quality is of a high standard, is there then an explanation for why the dead fish are washing up at shore?
Through you, Madam Mayor, just the statement I've got here is dead fish that have washed up in Port Phillip Bay have likely been moved from the creek backwash by winds and currents. So that's in regards to, there's still some monitoring in the rivers, but that hasn't got into the bay. Also highlight there, EPA are setting up a community meeting, which we can provide the details of. I believe it's actually, here it is, Thursday, September 6th at Footscray Town Hall for other community members that would like more information about this.
And to follow up again, because it is a very important issue, and thank you, Councillor Copsey, for bringing it to the chamber tonight. Is there a commitment from the EPA to continue monitoring the situation above what the normal monitoring is, which is, I believe, usually once a week, checking the water quality?
Mr Trail?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'll take over notice exactly what they are doing, but we've committed to continue working with EPA and our other emergency responses, so we can follow up and ensure that does happen.
Thank you. Councillor Copsey?
I don't know how to phrase this as a question, but just in response to the information coming through that the fish are coming from creeks, the fish that I've seen washed up on the beaches here don't look like river species, they look like bay species. So I'm not sure what the response to that would be, and whether officers have had contact with the Port Phillip Eco Centre or any of the other, for example, Beach Patrol, that do a lot of citizen science work, which may provide an alternate source of information to that work we're getting from the EPA, because that doesn't gel with what I've observed in our neighbourhoods. Have you had contact with those organisations around this incident?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I personally haven't had contact. The organisation may have, but I can ensure when I get back to the office, I can ensure that follow-through happens.
So you'll take that one on notice. I've got a couple of questions as well. I just wanted to understand the trees due to be replaced in St Kilda Road when they are removed. Have they been purchased yet? Because we'd want them as mature as possible when they're ready to go in. So I'm just wondering what the status of that is, please. Ms Rosick?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the trees for St Kilda Road haven't been purchased as yet. Two councils, City of Port Phillip and City of Melbourne, are working with the designers and Rail Projects Victoria to confirm the species of the trees to make sure they're suitable for the environment. And City of Port Phillip Council is going to trial an alternative elm species in another location to test its drought tolerance, and so the City of Melbourne are doing likewise. Project planning for planting of trees is broadly 2025 once the project is completed, but several opportunities to plant a little earlier are expected based on the program. And I can provide further details if required about those species.
Thank you. Just want to also get an update about the trolley local law that came into effect this financial year. We've had quite a bit of media around this. So this was a local law that we put in place or started the process in November last year. It's now come into effect. Just wondering how we're going around compliance.
Through you, Madam Mayor, that local law has been in place since the 1st of July this year. A lot of good works has been happened by supermarkets. There were a couple of supermarkets that didn't install their devices. We commenced enforcement during the month of August. We have handed out 7 infringements in regards to that local law. At the moment, there was at the end of August, there was only 1 supermarket remaining without devices. They have now been installed. They're not currently operational, but we believe that to be the case in the next week or 2. Therefore, we'll have full compliance with that local law. And next steps will be working with supermarkets, collection trolleys and a few Victoria Police around the abandoned shopping trolleys and creating more strategies to deal with that challenge for the council.
Thank you, Mr Trail. I've also got a question around the VAGO recommendations to all councils around their insurance. I'm just wondering if officers can provide an update on where the City of Port Phillip is at responding to that.
Through you, Madam Mayor. So overall, the findings in the VAGO report really reinforced Council's approach to managing its insurable risks, and that that is sound. So for the past few years, the Council has tested the market to determine whether it's getting value for money for the provision of its insurance services, and we've also undertaken a range of independent assessments of our risk exposure and coverage, and that's certainly pointed to within the VAGO report as being best practice. The report did highlight several areas which we'll be using to drive future improvement opportunities, in particular making better use of our claims data to really understand our risk profile, but also look to mitigate as many risks as possible before they become claims. It's worth noting that while it wasn't a specific recommendation as such, the report itself did reference that the Victorian Risk Management Framework, which is used by the Victorian Government, is a sort of model document in terms of guiding our risk management frameworks, and we'll certainly be using that to undertake a review of our risk policy and framework within this calendar year. The Audit Committee of Council in August, at their most recent meeting, received a confidential report on Council's insurance services, as well as a brief overview of the VAGO report, and that report will be provided in confidence to councillors as a briefing to note. At this point, it's scheduled for the 3rd of October.
Thank you, Ms Bennett. Another question from me as well. I've been approached by a couple of Rotary groups wanting to have access to the playground equipment that council no longer needs, and as part of the contract, just give it to them to put in the tip. They want to reuse it and repurpose it. If there's absolutely no risk to council in that all insurance and everything's taken over, is there anything stopping us from allowing Rotary to take the old playgrounds and repurpose them?
Sorry, Madam Mayor, we would need to look at the risk elements of that. One of the challenges of regifting playground equipment is generally to meet Australian standards, they're fixed in quite securely, and it's very hard to not damage them when you do renew playgrounds. Most of our renewal of particular equipment is generally at the end of its useful life, so it's sort of not safe to pass on. But when we do whole playground upgrades, that is something we can probably consider on a equipment case-by-case situation. If there are any parts of that equipment that we can remove without sort of damaging it, we can consider if there's no risk issues to council.
So, Mr Trail, you'd be willing to look at a project that had no risk?
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, I'm happy to work with Rotary on that initiative.
Okay. And one other question from me. Sorry, I've got a lot of questions. Oh, Councillor Bond, why don't you have it? One other one. I've noticed of late lots of telcos and other service providers digging up our footpaths, putting in caps in our footpaths absolutely everywhere, anywhere, no sort of order. There doesn't seem to be any organisation and how this is done. You've got Telstra and Optus and broadbands and all sorts of things next to each other, and they're not using the same pits. They've got different cables, different lids, generally destroying the look and the feel, I think, of our footpaths. What can we do to ensure that they all either use a single pit or there's some sort of coordination going on here with their digs?
Through you, Madam Mayor, just to give some colour to your issue, about 75% of footpath complaints tend to relate to utility service pits and their conditions. It costs us approximately $1.2 million a year to rectify these pits at the moment. It's a high priority item for our asset protection team. One of the steps that we have taken recently, if we've engaged in discussions with a neighbouring Metro Council that has a very successful program particularly aimed at these type of issues. We see some significant learnings there, and our asset protection team are working on that. We also have prioritised the project relating to standards and designs with respect to how these pits should be left after they've been worked on by the telco companies. So it is a high priority item for us, and we would expect to see improvement through the year, and we will report back to you at a later stage.
Thank you. Councillor Bond.
Just on the subject of services pits, Fitzroy Street was marked up about 11 months ago to have all the damaged services pits repaired, and it hasn't happened as yet. Can I get an update on when that's likely to occur?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Councillor, I'll have to take that on notice, but we'll get back to you as soon as possible.
Thank you, Mr O'Keefe. Councillor Bond.
A couple of residents have contacted me with regard to the condition of the Peanut Farm Reserve in St Kilda. It was refurbished about 6 months ago, the surface of the ground. It's now in absolutely appalling condition. What has gone wrong with that oval, and when do we intend to rectify it?
Mr Trail.
Through Madam Mayor, in regards to the issues, what's going there, I'll need to take that on notice, but we have, in the last 2 years, done a ground upgrade on that. Sometimes grounds, if they're overused, they'll wear and tear early before they establish, but I'll need to report back to Council exactly on the reasons why it may be in its current state.
Thank you, Mr Trail.
And while you're at it, can you look into the oval at Alma Park? It was also refurbished about 12 to 18 months ago. It's in a similar type condition. When I looked at it this afternoon, it's very grass depleted and in no condition to be used for competitive sport. So when do we intend to rectify it, and what has gone wrong in this oval as well?
Mr Trail, do you want to take that one on notice as well?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we do have a current project, Alma Park water harvesting, which will install some tanks under that ground. As part of that project, that will be some regrassing and repairs to that particular site.
Thank you. Any other questions, councillors? Okay, then we'll move on to the presentation of reports. Now we'll move first to item 8, which is a presentation of the CEO report. We don't have any members of the public that's requested to speak. Councillors, do you have any questions? Councillor Baxter.
Look, I just have one. It seems as though, with regard to the project delivery update or the indicators talking about what's on track, what's at risk, most of the at-risk indicators appear to be due to community satisfaction survey results being lower than expected. What are we doing to address these? And it seems, it really seems like if we address these, we'd actually put most of these back on track. So, what happened? What can we do to address it going forward?
Through you, Madam Mayor, so since the publication of the community survey results, council officers have been working through the detail that sits behind them, so there's quite an extensive amount of verbatim comments that council officers have been working through, and for some of the items where there's been a particular decrease, so I think when we last considered these figures there was a conversation around the reduction in overall satisfaction with the health and wellbeing of the community. So the officers have paid particular attention to that and also have spoken with the survey providers to gain greater insight. That information across the suite of indicators is being used by officers to proactively improve services in a range of areas. For some of them in particular, this feedback is being used extensively by our customer experience program. So they're using those insights in particular to really explore them in a lot further detail. In terms of whether they're pitched as being on track or off track, because the figures that the council received were lower than the target, in terms of being very transparent at this point in time, they're off track as compared to the target. So that's why they're reported in that way. But we certainly are taking this data incredibly seriously and really interrogating it and using it as much as we can to improve our services and our policies and strategy responses to you.
Thank you, Ms Bennett. Another question, Councillor Baxter, and then...
Yeah, sorry, I actually had a second question that I had forgotten. The other one was around, in Direction 3, Smart Solutions for a Sustainable Future, the potable water usage was, pardon me, again above target and has been for quite some time. Can I get an officer to explain where we're going with that, given that we've endorsed our new sustainability strategy and how we're going to go forward?
Mr Walters.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the key drivers for our planned improvement in potable water use circulate around our water harvesting projects. One in particular is actually we've achieved the best results to date with respect to the water harvesting program that we've got with the City of Bayside in Alstonwood Park. We've achieved some good results in that. However, the targets rely on the success currently of two proposed projects in the portfolio. They are the Alma Park water harvesting project that Mr Trail mentioned earlier, and also the future, subject to its viability, of the Albert Park water harvesting project. So they are two key big ticket items that will bring us to our water harvesting targets over the life of the strategy.
Councillor Simic.
I have a specific question with respect to Direction 2, which is starting at page 11, and the Kerford Road Safety Improvement Project, which under status has a tick against it, but says this project's been placed on hold until the scope and scale of Victorian Government's funding committed for the Shrine to See is determined. We had a report come to Council and it was deferred on this basis. That was some months ago already. What's the timeline that we are working towards here, and when will this project be brought to us again for consideration, noting that we've had several members of the community contact us about this already as well?
Ms Rosick.
Through you, Madam Mayor, with that project is has been delayed because Parks Vic are the lead in that project and are currently in the process of employing, I've been advised, employing personnel to work on that project. They're committed to working with all key stakeholders, including Council, on that project, and we should hear further in the coming months. So we've had some preliminary discussions.
Mr Carroll, why is there a tick there in this case when it is actually off track for no fault of the Council?
Through you, Madam Mayor, my interpretation of that would be that as the Council's been informed that it's off track or that it's been deferred, that we've currently registered that and we're reporting it as green, but I think we need to check if that should be the appropriate way to report it.
I also have a question on the organisational scorecard coming under Direction 6. My usual question around performance plans being off track. Also, total recordable injury frequency rate, again, there's a yellow triangle. And I just wanted to, also while I'm here, the audit and risk actions completed are on time. I just wanted to, if someone could please give some answers on those, please.
Through you, Madam Mayor, completion of performance plans is certainly a really important responsibility for all of our leaders, and the executive team have certainly been reinforcing that across the organisation and providing support where that's required to help complete that task. We do have a number of staff across a number of workplaces with different needs, and we need to make sure that we accommodate those different needs and work styles as a result. In terms of our occupational health and safety statistics, again, we're working very hard to improve culture and responsibility in that space. Certainly by the end of this week, we will have completed across all of our leadership teams, so that is right from the executive through to our people leaders safety leadership course, to remind them of their roles and responsibilities as it relates to health and safety. And we're also making a number of improvements to our safety management system and educating our staff around that. We're paying very close attention to this data. It's something that's reported and monitored very closely at the executive level each month, and is also reported quarterly to the audit committee to provide assurance to the council. With respect to the audit actions that are completed, we have introduced earlier this year an internal group to strengthen the management of internal audit and risk within the organisation. Part of the role of that group is providing greater management oversight over the scoping and completion of audit actions. That's considered every month, and we're being pretty tough on people before they're able to actually properly close their audit action. So we certainly have quite significant rigour over ensuring that those audit actions are being completed on time, and not just in terms of a tick that they're completed, but that the work is undertaken in a meaningful way.
Thank you, Ms Bennett. I'm pleased to hear that. Any other questions on the CEO report? Councillors, we have an officer's recommendation. Do I have a mover for that? Catherine Copsey to move. Councillor Copsey to move. Councillor Baxter to second. Councillor Copsey, would you like to speak to the motion? Councillor Baxter? Would anyone like to speak? Councillor Simic?
Well, I think it is really important to acknowledge when the CEO report comes to us the incredible amount of work that our organisation does. Tonight we've picked up a few examples of where we believe further attention needs to be placed, but overall our organisation is performing incredibly well. So thank you to all of our officers and staff for their continued commitment to realising our council plan and goals that we've set for our council term.
Would anyone else like to speak? Then I will put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, could I just ask if we've been here an hour, and I assume that most people are here for the Alma Road. Is it possible to change the order to include that?
We've got one more item before that, because there are quite a few people for the next item here too.
Okay. Sorry.
Even though they're not speaking, they are here. So I do hear you, Councillor Gross. The Alma Road one will be heard after this next one. So we'll move to item 9.1, which is the North Port Oval upgrade and funding agreement. I'd like to ask Chris.
Madam Mayor, I, Councillor Dick Gross, declare that In relation to item 9.1, North Port Oval, I have upgrade and funding agreement that I have an indirect conflict of interest by close association in this matter.
Thank you, Councillor Gross. You can go and see Mr Chick for a while.
That's a threat, I promise.
Welcome, Mr Sewell. You're the president of the cricket club. If you could state your name and suburb.
Chris Sewell, president of Port Melbourne Cricket Club. Thanks once again for the opportunity to speak. I'm here tonight to discuss the proposed upgrades to North Port Oval and mainly the installation of the turf wicket table once the redevelopment work commences. Currently, we have 7 wickets on that table. And in the grade of cricket we play, which is community cricket, the recommendation is for 5 to 6 wickets on the table. We do intend, and we have applied to the Victorian Sub-District Cricket Association, which is the next level, a level higher than what we're playing now. Their recommendation for the amount of wickets is 6 to 7. We do believe through communication from council officers that once the redevelopment takes place, 6 wickets is the recommendation to go back into North Port Oval. But with our application to sub-district and the added responsibilities that come with that, mainly we are obliged to conduct junior representative carnivals over the Christmas period. They do have a country week. We believe that the use of the ground will be more significant than it currently is. Our growth in juniors has basically, from 5 years ago, from having no juniors to this year having 10 sides, possibly 11. We feel we have a need to probably extend the recommendation of 5 to 6 to probably 6 to 7. We did this year intend to have a women's side, which we earmarked for playing at North Port Oval on Sundays, but with the development happening during our next cricket season and ourselves not getting back on until 2019-20, we believe under the current arrangement with the curation we've had in the past, we're not all that confident that a 6-wicket table would hold up. Naturally, the more wickets on the table would mean less use per wicket, which would allow for regrowth. And the issues we've had in the past that with a 7-wicket table, poor curating has probably meant that we've only been able to have 4 or 5 wickets that are actually playable. So with women's cricket coming on board, we do have 2 international cricketers that are willing to lead that side. We do have a contact from the Luke Batty Foundation to host the Celebrity T20 game again, which will incur more use. And as we did this year, we hosted the All Abilities Carnival for the blind and deaf cricketers as well. So with the greater use on North Port, when we do get back on in 2019, we would like to ask the question whether is a possibility that maybe 7 wickets could go back on. 7 would be great. 8 would be even better. And that's not from a selfish point of view, that's from the point of view of it allows regrowth on the wicket, and it will have an effect on the football club as well, being that the regrowth won't incur bare patches, and any rain we do get in late February and March won't impact on the football club either. So we're just asking if maybe consideration could be given to 7, maybe 8 wickets. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Sewell. So that's the only member of the public that has requested to speak. Councillors, do you have any questions of the officers? Councillor Crawford.
So my understanding was that an agreement had been reached between the 2 clubs for 6 wickets. Isn't this a request at a last minute which would change the complete report that we're about to do? Because we can't really... So could I clarify? I thought there was an understanding of 6 wickets was what we were going to be approving tonight, and a last minute ask for requests would defer this item or would put all the timeframes out of whack.
Mr Trail.
Through you, Madam Mayor, we've been working with various stakeholders, both associations and cricket clubs, and been of the understanding that 6 wickets has been agreeable. We're doing a lot of improvements to the wickets so they can improve for playability. This request for 8, the 6 does comply as presented. It does comply with community and upgrade improvements, and we believe the higher standard, and it still is our recommendations, officers, that we should progress with 6, as if a resolution is not achieved tonight, there could be a delay to the project, which means all the planning working with cricket and football to create a construction window and to limit the impact would be not be able to achieve this summer.
I also have a question. So how will having cricket wickets, 6 or however many we have, stop and redoing the ground? How is this going to stop the problem of waterlogging that's been experienced over many years from the Murray Creek mud?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the main challenge we've had at Northport is that the ground has never had a drainage infrastructure and soil profile built to modern day standards to help drain away water on the surface. Without that drainage, we've been having water pooling and creating issues for us. That's underneath the Mary Creek and the cricket wicket surface, but also the outer field. So this ground's in desperate need of a reconstruction. We've been nursing it through for the last 7-8 years at great cost, at great reputational risk to council and the sporting clubs that operate out of that facility.
Does anyone else have any questions? Councillor Simic.
My question is just about community access to Northport Oval and how the community, first of all, what sort of access is open to them and how their needs are balanced in consideration of this report with respect to the 2 other major players as well.
Through you, Madam Mayor, community access has been a great pillar of all the work that we've done at this site over the last 5-6 years. It was part of the agreement with SRV funding to build the pavilion and upgrade the Norm Gross. We know this is a parcel of open space within the Fisherman's Bend urban renewal area. There is a big challenge for sport and rec provision within our municipality and the growing challenge. We need to change the way that sports are provided. They need to act as passive and recreation spaces going into the future if we still want to increase people having healthy opportunities. In addition to these works, we've got future provisions in our budget to do further work to make it more inviting for people to access that during non-competition games. So it will be a passive space whilst formal cricket or football is not currently activating there.
Mr Trail, this is an almost $2 million expenditure for, I do believe, a much-needed upgrade. What guarantees have we got that it's going to be playable after a big downpour of rain in the future?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we've done some designs to ensure this ground is up to the standard of elite football competition, which will benefit community use and also the sport of cricket. The people we're looking to engage with a funding agreement, AFL, is getting the best services possible to deliver this. It is of high importance that we get the quality right. And we've had this design managed in a way where it will actually drain the surface away. We have benchmarked the cost of this, and it's comparable to other projects that other municipalities are doing in Whitehorse and Casey to upgrade similar services.
Councillor Pearl.
My question got asked, but just out of interest, is there anyone in the gallery today from AFL Victoria or the Port Melbourne Football Club? You don't want to make any representation? It's a $2 million investment. It's quite a big deal that's been made. That's all. You don't have to. I was just interested. Thank you for coming.
Councillor Pearl, I understand they're supportive of the officer's recommendation. Councillor Simic.
So I just want to go back to the Vickets, and thank you for that representation. I'm just not clear on where we're at currently. The report says 5 to 6. Is there room for us to consider an alternative? And what would be the impact of an alternative? I know that Councillor Crawford asked a question about the negotiations to date, but I'm still not very clear on where we are with that particular point.
Mr. Trail.
Through you, Madam Mayor, our recommendation is for 6 in the resolution. The 5 to 6 is in reference to the association's expectations around community level cricket. The 6 to 7 quoted was expectations for a sub-district. So our recommendation complies with all the associations. It complies with AFL Victoria, and I recommend we progress with that recommendation based around the stakeholders and compliance with all their requirements.
Just to clarify, Mr. Trail, in the recommendation it doesn't mention the number of wickets at all. It does in the text of the report, however. So probably just clarify whether we need to have that in the recommendation or not. And I believe there is a slide update of the recommendation coming up on the screen as well. It's not there yet.
Through you, Madam Mayor, just looking through the resolution, you are correct, there is no reference to the 6 wickets. For clarity, it would be handy to have that decided as part of the resolution tonight.
Maybe we could have some words for that, please, Ms Bennett. That would be great. Just one more question from me, Mr. Trail. Are you able to outline exactly what Council's role will be in relation to the AFL in delivering this project?
Through you, Madam Mayor, with the funding agreement, we would be engaging AFL Victoria and their qualified contractors to deliver works for and on behalf of Council. We have a clear scope of our requirements in terms of the fence, the goalposts, the ground, the drainage, the requirements. Part of that scope would be how many cricket wickets we deliver. Council will be having project management oversee the works to ensure that we get the quality expectations we have. We'll also have quantity surveyors check off on payment claims to ensure that we pay for works done to date. So we are confident that we have a plan in place to work with AFL Victoria.
Any further questions, councillors? Okay. Well, we have an officer's recommendation which is just being updated, I think at this stage. And just wanted to bring to your attention, councillors, from the report that you saw, there is some slight wording changes in the 3.1. The intention's still the same. Oops, I've gone. We'll just wait till that gets added. Mr. Trail, that's an officer's recommendation that's now up on the screen. So, Councillor Crawford, you don't need to add that. Councillors need any more time to consider that additional 3.6? Okay, then this is officer's recommendation. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Pearl to move, Councillor Crawford to second. Councillor Pearl, would you like to speak to the motion? You may reserve your right. Councillor Crawford.
I just want to say that it is a huge cost that we are bringing forward because we do recognise the importance of both sporting clubs using this oval and the value it brings to our community, but we do need to have a ground that is of a high standard, and I think through this recommendation and this agreement we have with the AFL to deliver, hopefully it will make it beneficial for both of them. Given the tight time frame and that it could really throw seasons off, I will be in support of this motion for the 6 wickets. And yes, I think this is a good thing to bring forward, but I know it is very time dependent, so I will be supporting the motion as it stands, or recommendation as it stands.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Bond.
Just to say that, yes, this is a very good investment for us. This ground has had a number of issues over the last couple of years where the football club hasn't been able to use that because of issues with the centre wicket area. I probably should point out here that this is an area, I think, in which this council needs to improve greatly. We don't have as many ovals as many other municipalities have. We've only got about 5 or 6. And given the condition of the Peanut Farm Reserve that I saw today, the Alma Park Oval, and then the issues we've had with this one, that's at least half of our ovals are probably what I would describe as unusable at present. Not so much this one, but at various stages. The other 2 are definitely what I would call unusable, not fit for purpose. So I think it's fair to say this isn't an area in which we are excelling at the minute, and it's somewhere where we probably should place a bit more attention to detail on what it is we do, because these sporting clubs are becoming more and more, or the ovals are becoming more and more used by the community. The usage of these ovals is only going to increase as the participation in sport increases, and it's something I think we need to be very, very aware of and improve, an area in which we need to improve greatly.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Councillor Simic.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a very important project and one that I wholeheartedly support. I'd like to thank the various clubs present here tonight for coming and supporting the officer's recommendation. What I particularly like about the report and the officer's recommendation is that it does take into consideration the need for us to support recreation and support competitive sport in our municipality. There's more and more people moving into our area and more people becoming involved in competitive sport, which is incredibly important for people's well-being and health and so forth. But also balancing that out and making sure that there's enough community access for places like our ovals and an opportunity for people to take part in active and passive recreation. Open space is becoming incredibly scarce and is in direct competition with a large amount of development happening in our area. So ensuring that the use of Northport Oval is maintained for all different parties is incredibly important. I thank the officers for the work that they do in managing these negotiations and making sure that those views are also represented. So thank you, and I wholeheartedly support the officers' recommendation tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Simic. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? I will briefly as well just like to thank the Port Melbourne Footy Club and the Port Melbourne Cricket Club for coming here tonight. It's great that we're actually finally, moving this project forward. It's been quite a few years that this has been coming up and up again. I will note that there was an opportunity quite a few years ago, and unfortunately at that time the ground was great and it didn't need to go ahead, so it got deferred. So I'm really pleased that we've been able to find almost $2 million to be able to really rectify this fantastic asset that we have in Port Melbourne / Fisherman's Bend. We have suffered as a council, and I know the clubs have suffered reputational damage because of the ground not being up to scratch, particularly in the opening round. I have to say I'm really looking forward to next year when we're going to have a new ground and you know, we're going to be lifting that flag for the footy at least. You know, the first day back, and being able to run out on a nice new ground that's going to drain well and is not going to be affected by floods. So I also want to acknowledge the cricket club. Thank you for your generosity. You know, this did start at 5 cricket wickets. We have moved to 6. We can't consider any more tonight. Those conversations may or may not occur going forward, but right now we've got 6. I think that's a good outcome going forward. So thank you for your attendance and coming and speaking to us tonight. Councillor Pearl, would you like to close?
Thanks very much. It's good. This has wholehearted support of most people, and particularly the 3 Gateway ward councillors who are very happy to see this going forward, of which I include myself. And that is a huge investment for the council. But I think this partnership model is something we need to focus on. So, as Councillor Bond said, there's issues currently with some of the grounds we have in our municipality, given some of the photographs I've seen today. And this seems to be the model where hopefully we can get some traction, partnering with people that know how to manage sporting grounds, and particularly elite sporting grounds. Means ratepayers should get better bang for their buck, and the clubs and associations should get a better value deal as the years go by. So I hope we can scale this out. There's other grounds in the municipality which I don't think have appropriate deals, such as the soccer oval in Murphy's Reserve, which still isn't open to public access, which doesn't provide value to ratepayers. Hopefully we get this ground in better condition, and we can slightly increase the use of it potentially also as the future goes forward. It's a huge investment by the ratepayers. And maybe we can get some naming rights on the football Guernseys perhaps, or something. But we're obviously now a very big supporter of the Port Melbourne Football Club, and obviously the cricket club. But hopefully, particularly the cricket club has a very proud history, and hopefully this propels that club's history for the next few years at least on a world-class, high-quality cricket and football ground, which is a very special place to play sport, and there aren't too many places like this left with that sort of level of competition going on. It's so close to the city, so it's a very historic place, and very pleased to move this on behalf of all the Gateway ward councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Pearl. Then I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillor Gross can come back in now. Now we will skip 9.2, and as I mentioned before, we'll go to 10.1. which is the Alma Road, Alexandra Street, St Kilda East trial of safety improvements. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Councillors, we have 14 members of the public that have requested to speak. So I will be calling time at 3 minutes, so please keep your comments brief. Please do not repeat what has been said by other speakers. Thank you. Ask Carolyn Zhang, please. No, Carolyn? No? Okay. Damien Ross. Damon. My apologies. Welcome, Damon. Please have a seat. Please state your name and suburb.
Damon Ross, St Kilda East. I see this initiative as going to ultimately disadvantage more residents than anybody else. I've seen some problems with vehicles. It's a difficult intersection, especially vehicles going eastbound on Alma Road. There's a rise, and I note there are trucks parked adjacent to the cemetery, and as I understand it, oversized vehicles or large vehicles aren't allowed to park in suburban streets, and yet they are there. They severely affect the view of oncoming traffic for anyone trying to cross Alma Road on Alexandra Street heading south. Similarly, going north Alexandra Street, at that intersection, there are a couple of magnolia trees with very dense foliage, close enough to the intersection to completely block the view of the traffic coming along. I've also noted the reduction in the speed limits, and there has been zero policing of this. The signs have gone up and people just fly along. The revenue that can be gained is immense. I see the speed limits as being an ineffective measure in this instance. I also consider that there is not a great volume of traffic that uses Alexandra Street. I wouldn't consider it what you'd call a rat run, because there's nothing really feeding into it, or it's not going anywhere. It's generally local people just using that street to go about their business. So my main approach is the speed limits and the visibility at the intersection. The trucks being parked there, they are not allowed to be parked in the street, and they're never moved on. They severely block the view. And I would say, well, it will inconvenience me. I use it all the time. I would say that the proposed working of the intersection so as left turns only is a highly unusual approach to any intersection. I can't think of any others that would be. I can't think of any others being treated like that. And I say that if the incidences of accidents were such that something had to be done, that a set of traffic lights be placed at that intersection, as was done at the intersection of Inkerman Road and Alexandra Street.
Thank you very much, Mr Ross. Ms Sandra Fairthorne, please. Welcome, Ms Fairthorne. Can you please state your name and suburb, please?
Sandra Fairthorne, East St Kilda. I believe this proposed partial closure of Alexandra Street would in fact only increase the risk it purports to reduce. The proposal would only exacerbate the already congested local traffic at the Lansdowne Street Alma Road intersection, especially at peak hour. Lansdowne Street is simply too narrow, with parked cars on both sides leading up to Alma Road, to be considered a safe alternative, and it will be probably the only alternative most people consider. Furthermore, the impeded view in Lansdowne Street, as compared to the visibility on all sides, minus the trucks, when pulling into and out of Alexandra Street, makes this a potentially dangerous proposal. A small roundabout, a set of traffic lights, or clear signage indicating right turn restrictions at peak hour at the southern end of Alexandra Street is the safest and most practical solution, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms Fairthorne. Mr Chris Drossis, please. Hello, Mr Drossis.
Hi.
State your name again.
Chris Drossos, East St Kilda. The lady there just stated everything I was going to say. The best option from my point of view is a roundabout in that spot, and it's not as expensive as $36,000 for traffic lights or whatever everybody stated, and I think that's a solution to the problem. Otherwise we're going to have that congestion up the other end. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr Drossos. Alison Bowie, please. Welcome, Ms Bowie.
Thank you. I'm from Alexandra Street, St Kilda East. For the almost 20 years that we've lived near the corner of Alma Road and Alexandra Street, my family and I have been the first responders to countless accidents that have occurred at that intersection. And when I say countless, I'm not exaggerating. The number is far higher than the number reported in the report provided for this consultation. Not every accident or near miss is reported in the council statistics, and in fact I have witnessed at least 2 more since May, when we were informed of the implementation of the proposed safety changes. On Easter Saturday this year, my 2 teenage children were at home when a car flew off Alma Road at high speed, and collided with my neighbour's garage. The impact was so severe, the garage had to be demolished the following week. When I came home late that day, I was shocked to see the destruction the collision had caused. Later, my 17-year-old daughter said, "Mum, the noise was so loud that I was terrified of what I would see when I went out. I thought there would be bodies." Thankfully, there were no bodies. However, there were injuries, and it was only pure luck that there were no pedestrians walking past that spot at that moment. Every day, dozens of people walk past there, people on their way to the tram stop at the end of the street, the shops, parks, playgrounds, synagogues. As you know, the City of Port Phillip is a highly active and mobile pedestrian community. Following this shocking and traumatic event, it was with much relief that we received the letter from Traffic Engineer Jacob Avery informing us that the Council had committed to a trial of a partial closure of the intersection, as this had been identified as the most suitable method of improving safety of that intersection for all road users. We were informed that the trial would be going ahead within a few weeks. A couple of months later, my relief turned to dismay when I realised the timeline for commencement of the trial had passed and the safety measures hadn't been commenced. When I contacted the Council to find out why, I was baffled to discover that there was opposition to the safety measures from some pockets of the community. I'm here tonight to strongly urge the Council to go ahead with the proposed trial of safety improvement at the Alma Road, Alexandra Street intersection. It is my belief that it is only a matter of time before someone is seriously injured or killed at that intersection. Apart from the personal tragedy this would cause, this is an issue of risk for the Council and the ratepayers of the City of Port Phillip. I understand the proposed trial of a partial road closure will cause inconvenience to some members of the community, but I believe lives and personal safety must trump convenience on this occasion. As the closest house to the corner, I will be one of the residents most inconvenienced by these measures. However, in my view, a few minutes extra travel time is a small price to pay to safeguard the well-being of our community. I would also like to respond to some of the earlier speakers' comments, especially regarding the volume of traffic on Alexandra Street.
Please come to the end.
Yeah, can I say one more thing? Alexandra Street is a rat run, in peak hours particularly, and in actual fact, Google Maps throws people up Alexandra and Westbury Street when Hotham Street and Dandenong roads are busy. So I would urge the Council not to consider traffic lights or a roundabout, but to consider the proposal that has already been consulted upon and agreed upon as the most suitable solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Bowie. Ms Mary Lucas, please.
Good evening.
Welcome.
My name is Mary Lucas and I've been a resident of Alexandra Street for many, many, many years. And that intersection that we're discussing is growing in intensity with accidents, with the strength of the accidents and the number of the accidents. And just relating to something one of the previous speakers said, Alexandra Street's only used for the residents. That's not so. I cannot get out of my driveway, I'm second from the corner, between 7:30 and 9 o'clock because cars are coming straight through from other areas to get to wherever they want to go, especially parking their cars up in Alexandra Street by the cemetery up towards Dandenong Road. So my question to you is, with all the history that we have, that you are aware of, why is it even going to the residents to ask about what to do? Why don't you just do it? That's my question.
Thank you, Ms Lucas. A councillor may take up that question on your behalf. Thank you. Mr Greg Asher. Welcome.
Thanks. Yep, Greg Asher, East St Kilda. Several things I'd like to bring up. First would be a point of process, is that I only heard about this meeting because I got a yellow slip in my letterbox today. Otherwise I would have missed it. Usually I work too late, I wouldn't have got here. And There is an amount of distrust in the locals with council because after the cemetery wall incident where we got told the wall was damaged and needed to be repaired, and did we want to complain about that? And of course no one wanted to complain about a wall falling down, only to find out you took out half the parking in the street to fix it. So we weren't too happy about that. So there's a level of distrust. I had lots of neighbours running to me when they got home and found this yellow slip saying they're pulling one on us again, you better get there and say something. So I just wanted to flag that. The other thing is the proposed solution causes several problems that I don't think council are aware of. It's going to send a lot of cars through Murchison Street, which has an S-bend in it, that drops to one lane. So you'll have cars coming from two different directions into an S-bend, running into one lane into each other, which is likely to cause accidents. The other option is if you can only do a left turn at the end of Alexandra Street, then cars will do the left and then try and do a U-turn in Alma Road. And that's likely to cause accidents on a thoroughfare that is Alma Road. And the other option is to try and keep going south, then they'll turn a right turn after they go onto Alma Road into Wilga Street and then do a right turn onto Inkerman, which puts more traffic past a preschool, which is less than ideal. And you've gone to all the effort of saying that it costs about $600,000 to $700,000 to put in a set of lights on Inkerman Street, and then you're going to be diverting traffic to the parallel street beside it, which kind of like ruins the point of actually putting in traffic lights on Inkerman Street in the first point. The solution, I think, would be to put a roundabout in if lights are too expensive. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mr Asher. So, Michelle Prezic, I'm sorry, I got that wrong. Welcome.
It is a difficult name, Madam Chair, Michelle Mardesht,
Thank
and
you.
I live. Okay. The Alma Road, Alexandra Street intersection is the main exit and access point for residents living in that vicinity. We use that intersection to access community facilities, our childcare centres, our schools, Carlisle Shopping Centre, our council offices, our library, all those facilities that are nearby, they're the things that we want to access. So we use that intersection. Other people also use the intersection, and they use that intersection to avoid the traffic lineups and the queues at Orrong Road and Hotham Street. There's no question that it is a very busy intersection, and in fact I stood there a couple of days ago and I watched it. One of the main issues is the speed coming down, the speed of cars coming down down Alma Road. Cars block the intersection, so they don't allow adequate space for cars to move across or to turn right. The busiest time is in peak hour time, so we're talking 2 to 3 hours a day when it's busy there. The rest of the time it's not. So as local residents, we are going to be impacted 24 hours a day, not just the 3. The consequences are, if we can only do a left-hand turn, as a previous gentleman said, we will do U-turns. And I did it the other day just to trial it. We'll turn left, we'll do a U-turn. That will put us at risk. The other option is to go up to Lansdowne Road and Alma Road, and that is a dreadful intersection. And in fact, local residents don't use that intersection because you can't see traffic coming from Orrong Road down the hill because of the blind rise. There's also a plane tree there, there are cars there. It is a 4-part intersection, just like Alma and Alexandra. It is chaos. Because there are parked cars, it'll be reduced to 1 lane. And so what's going to happen is you're actually going to move the problem from Alma Road, Alexandra, to Lansdowne, Alma Road. Local residents will be lining up to get out of Lansdowne Road to do a right-hand turn. Cars will be trying to do a right-hand turn coming from Morong Road along Alma. There's going to be congestion. There's going to be gridlock. There's going to be more problems there than we can even foresee. I think we need to stage the solutions at Alma Road and Alexandra Street. Let's not just block
Please
it off
come to the end,
straight
Michelle.
away. Let's look at some measures, no right-hand turns in peak hour, put some signage on the road, keep clear so that cars don't block the intersection. That makes it easier for people to cross or turn right, and do something about the speed of traffic coming down that hill, because a reduction from 60 to 50 didn't work because we didn't police it. We didn't monitor it. Cars speed down that hill. Just one more thing, Madam Chair. I noticed on the council agenda tonight that council's catchphrase under transport and parking is "we are connected and it's easy to move around." Please, councillors, think about that, because for local residents, we won't be connected. It won't be easy for us to move around. We're going to be locked in, and when we do want to get out, we are going to be put more at risk, I would suggest, than we are now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I've got Anthony present.
Anthony Desht.
Desht.
D-E-S-Z-C-Z.
Oh, it's a D.
D for David.
Apologies, it looks like a P to me.
It's a good Polish name, means rain. And we need it, this country needs it.
We learn something every day.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it needs more Desht. I'd just like to add my 2 cents. And someone here earlier said that Alexandra isn't a rat run. Well, I beg to differ. It is a rat run between 7 and 9 every morning. It's a rat run. They're trying to beat the traffic. They'll see them banking up all the way down to St Kilda Road, so they try to cut across. And as Michelle was stating earlier, by blocking us out, you're going to move it further up the hill. And also, council is responsible for a multi-storey apartment block with an underground car park that is 10 metres away from the intersection of Alma Road and Lansdowne. Now, those people wanting to go to work or come home, go to work or from work, are going to be wanting to come out of the underground car park. You're going to have people wanting to make a right-hand turn. You're going to have people coming down that hill. That will be a black spot. At the moment, it isn't a black spot. A bit of motive black spotting there. A black spot is where someone dies. No one has died there yet. They will die eventually because police and the council aren't monitoring the speed. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Vlado Vengev. Okay. Costas Morphis. Welcome.
Hi. Yes, I'm the owner of the house that had the garage demolished. So I just want to reiterate, I think everyone agrees that it is an issue, but I just want to reiterate that, and I think it's pretty clear that if we try and restrict traffic and reduce the flow, we're going to create downstream side effects that are going to be undesirable. I think fundamentally we should try and manage the flow of that intersection, and definitely, like, people heading east are going to have to do U-turns, 3-point turns. That means they're going to be backing out into oncoming traffic. It's going to be, I just did that, it's going to be much more dangerous. So definitely look at something that restricts the flow and, the downstream speed. Whether it's policing or physically putting speed barriers there is something. And then having traffic lights, people knowing that there's oncoming traffic lights will definitely reduce the speed as well. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morphis. Kevin Curtis, please. Welcome, Mr. Curtis.
Hi, I'm Kevin Curtis. I live on Murchison Street in St Kilda East. the Alexandra-Alma Road intersection is dangerous, but my concern is that we have to turn right onto Alma Road. If we can't do it there, we'll have to do it somewhere else. The somewhere else is Lansdowne Street, which is even more dangerous. There's 2 blocks of flats on each side of Lansdowne Road. It's much narrower, and apparently we're getting an underground car park entry into there. It is a very narrow street, and it'll make things worse. You will be blocking that off next year because the accident rate will increase. I think either traffic lights or a roundabout, speed bumps, speed policing of the speed limit, whatever else is applicable would be a much better idea than just blocking it off and restricting our access. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nina Squaddy's Schiff, please. Oh my goodness, I've got all the hard words tonight.
Nina Schiff. I live in Murchison Street as well, and I agree with previous speaker. It is a dangerous intersection. However, I want to see different measures trialled before closing the right turn. I'd like to see speed cameras, speed reduced to 40, and roundabout sounds like a good idea. I think just pushing up the problem up the road. That's pretty much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And our last speaker, Romy Peltoglov. Yeah. Failed again.
Thank you. It's Romy Peltoglov from Murchison Street, St Kilda East, and I drive through that intersection with my 3 noisy children in the car every morning at peak hour, and I say no one's allowed to talk till Mummy gets through the intersection, and everyone has to sit in the back and watch and wait, and people are beeping horns and getting frustrated. Everyone's looking at each other. Are you going? Am I going? Shall I go? Should you go? Thanks. You know, it's very unclear as to who is going where, when, and what the rules are even in that spot. People on bikes are coming, gushing down the hill. There's prams. There's children on bikes on their way to primary school. There's people walking with earpods in and things going to the tram. And the speed limit, is too fast. So basically, I'm very concerned about the intersection and using that intersection. The other option for us would be to go right up Alexandra to Dandenong Road, but all the non-local traffic is banked up and they're trying to cut through to Dandenong Road, as everyone else has suggested. So I would support Damon that there are trucks parking there, obscuring the view to turn right from Alexandra to Alma to head west, and those trucks are, I mean, even if they were pushed back 3 or 4 car parks, all the other car parks behind there are empty, but they're right up close to the closest one in the intersection. I think Sandra, Chris, Michelle, John, the other speakers whose names I don't have, I agree with their recommendation or suggestion that it be traffic lights or a roundabout or some sort of keep clear pedestrian support crossing, zebra crossing, flashing lights, 40, and just a lot more awareness. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillors, do you have any questions for the officers? Councillor Simic.
Thank you to everyone who's come tonight to present on this issue. It's very clear that it is an important topic for
Question for the officers, please, Councillor Simic. We're not.
Yes, I'm getting to that. A very important issue for us to be considering. So thank you for coming. I've got a couple of questions, and my first question, given that so many different alternatives were already recommended tonight, why officers have come to the conclusion they've come to in their recommendation, and to what extent those alternatives have already been considered, or have they been considered?
Ms Rosig or Ms Dimitrik?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'll let the Senior Traffic Engineer talk about the specific traffic measures that have been considered and what has led to this conclusion. I will just talk about speed. So in regards to the reduction in the speed from 60 to 50, that has not sufficiently mitigated the risk. We have reported the speeding vehicles to the Stonington police patrols, and they have indicated that they will increase policing of that area. Not all the accidents, or a large majority, are not related to speed. However, I have even frequented that intersection and recognise that there are speeding issues, and we are addressing that issue.
Mr. Metrick.
Through you, Madam Mayor, we have police data on the crashes at the intersection of Alma and Inkerman. Most of them are cross-traffic crashes. We have 8 registered crashes and 2 that were reported to us. Out of the 8 registered crashes, 6 are cross-traffic and 2 are different. One is right turn and the other one is rear end. This is an indication that, well, going through the data, that drivers coming out of Alma Road, coming out of Alexandra Street, wanted to cross Alma Road, do not choose safe gap in traffic flow. They managed to get through the first leg of Alma Road, but then they collide, and unfortunately, mostly with bicycle riders. So when we look at what causes the crashes, we looked at options that we could consider. The ultimate solution would be traffic signals. Signals are estimated to cost in order of $600,000 to $700,000. I'm not sure that council would be able to fund such extensive expense. So we looked at external funding through black spot funding, because the intersection is actually recognized as being a black spot. Black spot means not people dying. What it actually means is there need to be 3 registered crashes in a 5-year period. Those crashes could involve fatalities, could involve serious injuries, could involve minor injuries, but there need to be 3 registered crashes. We have had 6 in a 5-year period since we started monitoring the intersection. So traffic signals would be the ultimate solution. There's a cost of how much they would cost, and for TAC or Vic Roads to fund those signals, there needs to be some sort of benefit coming out of those. So it is called benefit-cost ratio. When we calculated benefit-cost ratio for traffic signals, it came out as 1.6. The minimum benefit-cost ratio that we could make funding applications must be 3. And the government recently announced black spot funding for this coming year, and an average benefit-cost ratio was 6. So we would not secure external funding for traffic signals. Then we looked at a roundabout. Roundabouts are fantastic in terms of vehicle traffic flow because they reduce conflict points for vehicles. They provide better connectivity. Unfortunately, roundabouts are not very good in terms of pedestrians because they don't consider pedestrians whatsoever. Pedestrians have no rights at roundabouts. And they also are not very friendly to bicycles or bicycle riders. And majority of the crashes that we have at that intersection are bicycle crashes. And the cost of roundabout for that location would be in order of around 250 or 300,000 should roundabout be considered. So we, again, disregarded that option due to not only cost, but causing other safety concerns to vulnerable road users like pedestrians and bicycle riders. I have heard suggestion to introduce turn bans. In terms of introducing just some signs and not have proper either physical enforcement of the signs or constant police enforcement, those turn bans would not be adhered to. Unfortunately, some drivers in these days don't care much about the rules. When we looked at the crashes, not all crashes are peak hour related. Yes, in 2013 and 2014, we had 4 crashes that happened during morning peak, but then in 2015, 16, 17, we had 4 more crashes that happened almost like randomly at 6:50 p.m., at 1:10 p.m., nearly 4 p.m. on Saturday. Those crashes happen regardless of time, regardless of peak hour. Therefore, when we are equipped with all this knowledge, the only solution that we could come up with that would be cost beneficial and would reduce or remove those crashes was our initially proposed full blockage of the median. That's when we went out for consultation with community, and the feedback was, no, we don't want full closure or full blockage because it would impact on us, on our convenience and the way we move around. We went for speed limit reduction, even though we knew the speed is not the cause of the crashes. We decided to go for speed limit reduction from 60 to 50 and continue to monitor the intersection. Unfortunately, as expected, because speed is not the cause of the crashes, we did not get the desired outcome. We considered the feedback we got from community and we modified our proposal. So we're not fully closing the median, we're partially closing. Yes, cross traffic from Alexandra Street across Alma would not be permitted under our proposal, but traffic traveling along Alma would be able to turn right into Alexandra Street. I think I have answered the question.
Just as a point of clarification, Mr. Mitrick quoted some accident statistics and said Inkerman Street, and just for clarification, he did mean Alexandra. And I would also add that this is proposed as a trial with monitoring, so its impacts, the speculative impacts that we've considered around redistribution of traffic will be measured and monitored, and we will report back on that outcome should this proposal be endorsed.
Thank you, Mr. Walter. Councillor Gross.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to ask the officers about the evidence or assertions about displacement of problems, and secondly, the increase in U-turns in Alma Road. Do we have any idea about the frequency of those?
Mr. Mitrick.
Through you, Madam Mayor, it is illegal to perform U-turn on Alma Road. There's a solid line going right through the centre, which makes it illegal to perform U-turn. No one enforces it because it hasn't been brought to us as a problem or to police as a problem. Should we find that it is causing problems, we can ask police for enforcement. In terms of misplacement, we expect that some traffic will go away from the intersection altogether and will remain on the roads where they're supposed to be, either Alma, Orong, Inkerman or Hotham. In anticipation that some traffic, especially local traffic, will move into Lansdowne Street, we, as part of the proposal, are proposing to install temporary curb-out stands on both sides to improve sidelines. Our current assessment is the sidelines are satisfactory, but we want to make them even better with the curb-out stands on both sides. In sidelines.
So Mr. Mitrick's talking about curb-out stands, which are extensions to the curb to create a buffer on both sides of the
Thank
intersection.
you, Mr. Walter.
Thanks very
people
much.
In the gallery, I understand that there might be some difficulty understanding, but please refrain from interjecting. Thank you. Councillor Crawford.
So I've got still some more follow-up questions, and I do know that the 3 ward councillors have been part of various emails and part of a consultation process, and I do know that you've gone through a lot of things, but can I clarify that, one, why was this not just done under delegation? Was it, and two, would Vic Roads even allow a set of traffic lights so close, like 1 block from Alma Road? Is that part of the thinking that would even, if they were ever to fund it, would that actually be allowed? You know, does there have to be a certain distance between traffic lights? And my third part to that question is, ideally, and I know it's inconvenience, would the traffic then go and do the block on Dandenong, down Hotham and back round when you have to go the different directions? I mean, I know that adds time, but is that where you would hope that some of the traffic may be funnelled in order to avoid the accident? Is that what the thinking is?
Ms Rosick.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'll answer the first part of the question, which relates to why this matter was brought before Council this evening. As we've heard from the gallery, this has been a challenging issue and one that has required significant analysis, and we have received significant community feedback. And to improve transparency, we have brought it to Council and have notified the most recent people that have submitted and further information and wanted further explanation as to why the proposed change to the median strip was recommended.
Through you, Madam Mayor, in terms of traffic signals at that intersection, Vic Roads would support it, providing that Council pays for the signals. There is a similar intersection just further down on Alma Road at Inkerman Street that is approximately the same distance from Hotham Street. And there was a third question regarding redistribution of traffic. We've got an independent traffic engineering assessment, and yes, it is expected that some traffic will disappear, especially through traffic that impatient drivers use. Impatient drivers are known to use roads that are very connective, easy to drive. Once that intersection is modified, those drivers will move away, and certainly they will not go into emergency zone, maybe for the first few weeks till they get adjusted to what's happening, but they will go away. In terms of local traffic, the data indicates some increase at the intersection of Alma and Lansdowne, and that's why we proposing to build curb-out stands to make that intersection safe as well.
Thank you. Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Bond.
In the event that all the traffic gets transferred to Lansdowne, what are we going to do then?
Through you, Madam Mayor, that is a good question. We said that we would be monitoring the impact of the intersection modification. We will be conducting surveys. If it is proven to us that the increase is greater than anticipated or could cause some danger, then we would implement some other measures to combat that situation.
Councillor Bond.
And do we have any existing crash data for the corner of Lansdowne and Alma? how many accidents have been in there over a comparable period of time?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we have. I haven't got it here with me, but there has only been one crash. One registered crash, I need to clarify.
One question from me, Ms Rosick. Is doing nothing an option?
Through you, Madam Mayor, based on the information we have, that it is a black spot area, that cyclists have been involved in collisions and motorists, as an officer, I don't feel we can not do nothing approach isn't feasible. Council has an obligation under the Local Government Act to protect the safety and has control over these roads, so it fits with Council's purpose. In regards to Lansdowne Street, if I could just add, it is a much narrower street, and as the traffic engineer indicated, we do expect increased traffic to Lansdowne Street short term. It is narrower, so motorists will quickly discover that they won't get to Dandenong Road any quicker, so we imagine that there might be some self-selection. But the risks at Alexandra and Alma Road are present, and we felt it was imperative to come to Council, and do nothing is not an option in our opinion.
One further question from me. There's been some people, including tonight, that didn't get any communication around tonight's meeting, and just wondering what the process was to make people aware of it. How was that communicated, and what happens? What is the situation if they weren't made aware?
Through you, Madam Mayor. The consultation for this entire process has occurred over quite a period. The initial consultation was a very broad one, and then when we came back with a modified proposal a little later, we contacted 473 residents and 20 of whom voiced some objection, and then subsequent to that, a group of residents came directly to Council to discuss issues. That group of residents who engaged with Council directly were informed directly of the item on tonight's agenda, and that was the extent of directly informing the community of the matter tonight, other than the advertised agenda of Council. In terms of the implementation timeline, subsequent to a decision tonight, we will go back to the 473 mail-outs that we did initially, plus there's a number of 180 who responded to the initial broader consultation. So that notification process would occur during September, subject to this decision.
So maybe it's a governance question around, so is there any recourse that people weren't notified and you only perhaps engaged with some people in terms of this meeting, apart from the notice in the paper about the meeting, but is there anything that we can give to the people that are asking that question? We got a couple of emails today about deferring the meeting, for example. Through you, Madam Mayor, if I might add, this is a matter that ordinarily a minor modification to a street like this, or obviously people don't think it's minor in its impacts, but the nature of this street modification is a delegated authority that the principal traffic engineer can undertake to do. So our intent was certainly to bring this to public attention so a frank and open debate could occur. So if people have not been informed, was certainly not an intent matter that did not allow them to be informed, and we believe we followed a standard practice with respect to this process. So
probably is a matter for governance or reconsideration if we get future examples of this.
Ms Rosick.
And if I can add to that Mr Walter's comment, as Ms Bowie mentioned, the community was under the impression we would proceed with the trial. However, we did postpone it to consider the further submissions. So the general residents and community living around that intersection were under the impression it was going to proceed. Officers have just chosen to bring this to Council's attention given the further submissions, and as has been outlined, we will notify all those people who provided submissions and feedback of Council's decision this evening.
Thank you. Any councillor have any further questions? So councillors do have the option to defer it during debate if that's what's wanted. Councillor Copsey.
I'd like to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor, did you have a further question or you want a second? Councillor Copsey to move and Councillor Crawford to second. Councillor Copsey, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you to everybody who's come to speak tonight with evident passion, and I understand, I'm not a ward councillor, but I do understand that this issue has been bubbling along for some time and that there's been extensive back and forth about both the road and the way that people locally use it, the obvious dangers that exist in its current state and the appropriate solution. I'm content to move the officer's recommendation tonight. I know that some won't consider this a perfect solution. Indeed, it's... Oh, sorry. If we could get the officer's recommendation on the screen. Thank you. Some people will not be satisfied with this moving ahead tonight if it is approved by the majority of councillors. But in the circumstances, I am satisfied that officers have considered the alternate treatments that have been brought up tonight. They've given them due consideration, and that there has been solid reasons why the treatment that's being proposed by officers has been selected as the appropriate one. This is a trial. The purpose of the trial is indeed to assess the effectiveness of the proposed treatment and to monitor whether there are any unintended consequences. We will certainly, as a council, be keeping an eye on that, and I'm sure that officers will be bringing further updates to this as it proceeds if it goes ahead this evening. I'm not sure if I've gotten my timeframes mixed up, but to understand that while the delay in the implementation of this, correct me if I'm wrong, please, officers, but we've had a delay in the implementation of the trial, and during that period had a further 2 crashes at this intersection, and that is a risk to public safety that I, as a councillor, am not willing to allow to continue. We need to try something, and it's a shame if it's a shame that that inconvenience should be considered more important, in my view. We do need to make sure that our streets are safe for everybody, particularly vulnerable road users, older and younger people, pedestrians, cyclists, and I do hope that this trial shows that we have selected a good outcome that balances the needs of residents and produces a safer road. I hope that councillors will support the officer's recommendation tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Copsey. Councillor Crawford.
So really, we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't. There is safety issues at hand, and there are inconvenience issues, and very genuine inconvenience issues. This city is lucky in so many ways, but we're a crossroads for many people getting to many other places, and it does affect our local amenity. And this is an issue that, as we grow, the wider Melbourne, but also this is becoming more and more a problem, local amenity in many, many streets. So this is just one of many. I know that officers have looked at all the alternatives. Ideally, in an ideal world, everyone would obey the speed limit and everyone would obey no turning between peak hours, but we know the reality is that they don't. And so we have to make a decision tonight which is about taking into account our humanness and the reality that people don't do the right thing and that people are living in a big city where they're impatient and will not follow the speed limit and don't always slow down, and, you know, we all have moments of concentration in the car. And so that's what I'm making my decision on tonight. Is in Elwood I'm the same, we have different roads that we have to get on, and in peak hours it's a nightmare and you usually have to leave 20 minutes before you have to get somewhere. And I know that it's at certain times that is really difficult, but it's happening for all of us. And one of the key things that we're trying to do with our new strategy is find ways where we lessen the local traffic on the road and improve public transport and find other ways to lessen the effect on our amenity. But in the meantime, I'm going to support this motion because we actually have to protect the safety of the people in the area, and I would not be able to live with myself if I voted against this and there were outcomes that were not ideal. So I acknowledge the inconvenience that will come for voting for this decision, but I also understand that in the long term, the safety has to be the priority, unfortunately, and we as a council are looking to where we can look after local amenity, and that I'm not sure all the answers, but that for tonight, the safety has to be the priority. And I apologise to residents for the inconvenience, but I won't apologise on voting on safety.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford. Councillor Baxter.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. So I also want to thank all the people that came to speak to this. So I'll also be voting in favour of the officer's recommendation. We've had a lot of discussions about this. Some of the people who are here tonight will have met me or spoken to me about this, and we've gone back and forth with a number of different things as we've tried to work out something that some kind of compromise that can be acceptable to the largest amount of people while also keeping the most amount of people safe. That's been really hard to find, that kind of solution. It looks as though the only way that we can actually reduce the amount of crashes is to put in a solution that will be quite inconvenient to a number of people. So we've had people come and talk about that we could enforce the speed provisions more. So reducing the speed was one of the sort of stopgap things we tried to bring in to see whether that was the kind of thing that might sort of reduce the need for traffic treatment. That didn't work out particularly well, and it also was a bit of It wasn't necessarily going to address the issue that speed wasn't always the cause of a lot of these crashes. The cause was that people coming out of Alexandra were nosing their way to the first lane, and then as they were coming to the second lane, having to very quickly try and complete their cross as they saw there was oncoming traffic and ending up getting T-boned. That's the most common crash, including motorists as well as cyclists. So the times of crashes also, as Mr. Mitrick said, was sort of appear to be throughout different times of the day and weren't all limited to peak hour. And we already heard about why the signalised intersection is something that we could perhaps work towards in the future, but is a very difficult thing to try and get funded and done anytime soon, and why a roundabout would not be a suitable treatment for that road. One of the things that wasn't said that I remember Mr. Mitrick saying to me at another time was that roundabouts also don't work particularly well when one of the throughways is much busier than the other one, that it can really unbalance the flow of traffic that way. So that's why the roundabouts won't work. So I say these sorts of things to sort of give an indication that we really have we've thought quite a lot about this, had a lot of discussions. It's not a simple, airy-fairy, we haven't thought of the consequences. One of the things that does worry me is the possibility of simply pushing this problem up the road to Lansdowne Street. I do think that that's a very reasonable worry for people to have. And that's why I think, the putting in the curb out stands so that we can push back some of that push back some of those cars and create those sight lines, I think is a smart thing to do. But also that this is a trial. We'll continue to monitor this, and if it does turn out we've just pushed the problem up the road and we're getting more crashes up there, we'll change things. That's what we need to do. So this is... And I also want to say that I'm quite familiar with this area as well. I used to live on Dandenong Road, and the way I'd access it, because getting there on Dandenong Road was not always the best way to do so. The way I'd access it was via Alexandra, then you go up Murchison, and then there's that access lane that'll take you to Dandenong Road, and that's how I'd sort of get there, and then there's a car park at the back. So I know how little and wiggly these streets are, and how many people use them as rat runs, and how dangerous those intersections can be. This is something that I think is a pressing issue. The safety issue is there. We've heard from people who have been affected by incidents here, which I think is, and thank you so much for coming, because I think that is, that hasn't happened to me. So to have someone talk about their experience is important. So I think we're going to need to go ahead with this trial, acknowledge that it will inconvenience people, evaluate the trial as we go. If it's not working, change it. I hope and I believe that our council will continue to remain open to hearing from residents about how the trial is going and how they think we should be doing things. I want to keep those lines of communication open, but I'll be supporting this motion tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Bond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I won't be supporting this because I don't believe what we're proposing here is the best solution to this location. All we're going to do here is clog the roads and frustrate drivers and shift them down the side streets and push them up to Lansdowne Road, and in a year or two's time we'll be sitting down with crash data from Lansdowne Road and saying, oh yeah, this is awful, we need to do something about this. The solution we need to put in here is a set of traffic lights. I'm staggered that we've gone to Vic Roads to pay for the solution, given this isn't a Vic Roads road. It's a City of Port Phillip roads, and roads being one of the 3 Rs, this is the sort of thing we should be funding ourselves. We often talk in these chambers about state government cost shifting, whereby the state government pushes their costs onto us. This is an example of us trying to cost shift to the state, us not doing our job because the state won't pay for a set of traffic lights to be built on a road that we are responsible for. This is the sort of thing that we should have been able to reach into a surplus if we had one, and one of those unexpected costs that comes up from time to time. It's happened every year I've been on council. This one here is about $500,000. Every other year we've had a couple of $1 million surplus that we could have reached into to come up with a solution for this, but we're not able to do that in this instance, is because we spent our surplus before the year had even started. So the only reason we're not putting the traffic lights in is because it's cost too much and we don't have the money. So I won't be supporting this. I think we should defer this motion. We should find a way to get the money through, looking at a few of our other non-essential spendings, things that are not one of the 3 Rs, and come back with the $500,000, whatever it is required to implement the best solution to the problem that I think everyone that's come along tonight has agreed is occurring at this intersection.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? If not, Councillor Copsey, would you like to close?
No, that's fine.
Then I'll put that motion. All those in favour? All those against?
May I request a division?
Councillor Copsey has requested a division, so I'll ask you to vote again. All those in favour? Councillor Copsey, Councillor Simic, Councillor Voss, Councillor Gross, Councillor Crawford, Councillor Baxter. All those against? Councillor Bond and Councillor Pearl. That motion is carried. Thank you. Now we're going to take a 10-minute break. We'll resume back here at 9:05. Thank you. Councillors, please resume your seats. Councillors, I'm going to alter the agenda slightly. The next item I'd like to hear will be the Victorian Pride Centre, because we have a speaker to that, and then I'll go back to 9.2, which will be the Children's Services Policy. So I'd like to ask Mr Peter McEwen please to come forward. So now we'll go to 12.2, which is the Victorian Pride Centre, consideration of the independent advisor's recommendations and requests for ministerial amendment, AMC 149, to the Port Phillip planning scheme. Welcome, Mr McEwen. If you could state your name and suburb.
Thank you. Yes, Peter McEwen, St Kilda. Madam Mayor, thank you for the opportunity. I'll start by just wanting to acknowledge the enormous amount of work that council officers have put in to get us to this point tonight. It was a rigorous consultation process and an excellent report from the independent advisor who considered all submissions. Now, this resulted in a number of recommendations to council tonight. I'll just go through a couple of them. We're happy to take on board the results of the crime prevention through environmental design assessment, and we thank council for undertaking this CPTED assessment, because security and safety for all users of the Pride Centre has been paramount for the board in the design of the building. We're also happy to accept the exclusion of nightclub as a potential use. We would much rather, I think, contribute to the revitalisation of the precinct through stimulating demand in existing nightclubs, of which there are many, rather than operating our own. So we're happy with that one. And we will work with the exhibited version of the flagpole on the understanding, I hope, that the design is still evolving and is dependent on specific funding, and we'd be happy to work collaboratively with council officers on a final design for that component. And similarly, we were happy to work with council on the operational details of the public car park. The independent advisor recommended that we consider the preparation of a good neighbour protocol in consultation with local residents, just to establish expectations around amenity and operations and to provide a pathway for potential resolution of any issues which might come up. We've picked up that notion and have already put it in the preparation of our operations plan, so we're happy to progress that one. So that leaves only really one area where the board has got a little concern in relation to the proposed condition for the Green Buildings Council of Australia's certification of design and as-built rating. It's always been the intention of the board to target 5-star Green Star certification. It was in the competition brief and it's strongly evident in the current design of the building. In fact, we've set aside 3% of the building budget specifically to fund ESD initiatives with a view to achieving 5-star Green Star certification. And we have already registered the project with the Green Building Council of Australia. However, in the council, the report, the conditions in the proposed incorporated document, it locks us into a position where we're not clear that we can guarantee full compliance at this stage with the outcome, particularly from an as-built perspective. So we've been in discussions recently with council officers for an alternative condition which more adequately reflects our commitment since day one. It does provide some flexibility and allows council to consider alternatives to achieve similar overall sustainability performance. And it's important to us because it is an incorporated document, and the last thing that we want is to have to approach council at some stage in the future for a further amendment to the planning scheme. And that was about all I wish to say on your report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr McEwen. Councillor Copsey, did you have a question for Mr McEwen?
If I may.
If that's okay.
Just on the Green Star rating,
Yes.
can you clarify a little bit more about what the practical issues are with the existing condition? What is it that would prevent you from being in a position to meet that condition?
What we're concerned about is the guarantee that we will achieve the 5-star Green Star. I've been through all these points. There's soft points, as you know, and there's hard points. We're doing all the soft points. There's things like an Aboriginal reconciliation plan. There's all sorts of things. We believe we can do it, but it's been required to lock it in that we're less sure about, particularly at the as-built stage, because we just can't guarantee that. There are different mechanisms. It's the objectives that we wish to achieve. It's been locked into a guarantee that we will achieve it that makes our ESD advisors and certainly our cost planners anxious, because we wish to go out to tender as soon as this planning process is through, and we can only guarantee that if we guarantee state government that we have all the dollars necessary to build. And so therefore we wish to prioritise any of those ESD components which support our long-term ownership of the building operationally. But as you would be aware, there's any number of components and points. And some of those, I'm told by our cost control people and our project managers, could be very, very difficult. And there are alternative ways to achieve the same objective. So it's just seeking that some flexibility rather than, because we're locking into a condition and we just don't know. We don't know how we're going to achieve it with all the best intention in the world. It's been a consistent position of ours from day one. We've always said it's our objective, we aspire to it, we will target it, but we can't guarantee it. It's that. You understand the subtlety? Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got a question also, Mr McEwen, for you. So have you seen the officer's alternative recommendation?
I believe so. There's been versions that have been...
There is one on my desk here which suggests a change. I'm just wondering if that satisfies your concerns.
Yes. This is the one that says the Sustainability Management Plan must either confirm that... Oh. Yes, yes, that is correct. And will achieve a similar overall sustainability performance outcome to the satisfaction of the responsible authority. Yes, that is the one that we, in respect to our ESD consultants today, in fact, they're happy to live with that.
Okay, so you're happy to live with that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillors, do you have any questions for the officers? Councillor Gross.
So I just wanted to clarify the current amended alternative recommendation takes into account the issues that we've just heard about approximating the 5-star Green Star rating. So that covers that by replacing it with a new 3.1. So if I was minded to accept the submissions that have just been put to us, they would all be covered by this rather lengthy condition.
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, that is correct. The alt recommendation before you does address the issues raised by Mr McEwen and effectively replaces, the more binding recommendations or conditions in relation to Green Star rating and provides a degree of flexibility while certainly still targeting the 5-star rating.
Thanks very much. I'm happy to move if no one else has questions.
Does anyone else have a question? No? Okay. Councillor Gross. To move, do I have a seconder? Councillor Copsey to second. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Gross?
Thanks very much, Madam Mayor, and through you. This is the culmination of a process that I only attended spasmodically, but when I did, I was convinced of the community's absolute approval and welcoming of this building in the form that it's been designed. I hope that it's going to... I have high ambitions for this building, and I hope that it'll be a transformative addition to Fitzroy Street. I don't want to go through all of those measurements, but I accept the recommendations or submissions of Mr McGowan on the 5-star rating, and I'm happy to move the recommendation as amended through the alternative provided to us by officers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gross. Councillor Copsey.
I'll echo the comments thanking the officers for work that they've done to help progress this process in a way that allowed for our community to have thorough input, but also met the needs of the VPC in progressing what's a very exciting development. I look forward to... I'm pleased to read the report. I'm satisfied that the community concerns and interests that have been raised have been addressed by the independent expert, and I'm very content with the shape that we're in and happy to support the motion tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Copsey, would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Gross, did you want to close?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Then I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Now we'll move back to 9.2, which is the Children's Services Policy. And councillors, we don't have anyone that's requested to speak from the community. Do you have any questions for the officers?
I've just got a quick conflict, if I may, Madam Mayor.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've just got a conflict in terms of indirect conflict of interest by close association. I'll remove myself accordingly.
Thank you, Councillor Pearl. Councillors, do you have any questions of the officers?
Yes,
Councillor Gross.
Because I'm from Elwood, my eyes immediately go to 3.2, number 6, which is that fit for purpose, sustainable facilities and environments. And I just wanted a few words about what does that mean for a municipality that has a range of differing facilities in child services, and some are fantastic and new and some are challenged. And I just wondered, what does this 6 mean for us in terms of how we roll out the review?
Through you, Madam Mayor. 3.26 is supposed to reference the facility strategy that is part of the Children's Services Policy. We currently have 23 assets that have children's services operating out of them. They are in various states, some which are quite new and some which are aging and have some BCA and DDA compliance issues. Item 6 is supposed to be a commitment by council to put the consideration and a facility strategy and asset management plan towards the buildings that are aging, and to ensure that all the buildings across the board are fit for purpose and meet BCA compliance.
Thanks very much. Look, I just think it's an important part of these 6 recommended clauses that I felt the need to highlight.
Any other questions, councillors? I have a question as well. Oh, Councillor Copsey.
I'm sorry if I've misread my report, but just looking at the at 3.2.6, there's some commentary in the report around a suggestion that contemporary be removed, but that fit for purpose be inserted in 3.2.6.
So fit for purpose is already in there?
Yes, but there was also some commentary in the report around feedback that contemporary be deleted, but I'm just seeking clarification from officers as to whether in officers' judgment contemporary should remain in 3.2.6. Is that intentional?
Ms Hamad?
Yes, the term contemporary was requested by the community when we were developing the original policy objectives. The word contemporary was requested to be removed by members of the Children's Services Reference Group, who are council-supported service providers. Specifically, that was a service provider that was in a more aging building and felt that the older buildings have just as much to offer as some of the newer, more contemporary buildings. We ended up putting both terms in to ensure that we represented the broad sort of assets that we hold.
Thank you. I understand.
Thank you. I have a question as well, Ms Hamad. And just looking at these draft policy objectives, are you satisfied that they cover everything that we need for our future to look after our children?
I believe that they do, yes. So Council has always expressed its commitment to children's services, to quality children's services in the municipality, and also its commitment to ensuring that the most vulnerable members of the community, being children from families who are experiencing hardship, difficulty, may have children with disabilities or English as a second language or third, if you will. And so I feel that all of these objectives demonstrate that council officers and council have heard the feedback that have come in from community, from service providers and educators, and that it synthesizes and consolidates that to ensure that we are able to fulfill our obligations as a landlord, as a service provider, etc., while ensuring that the community's needs have been heard and that those are addressed and considered in a new policy.
Thank you, Ms Hamad. Any further questions, councillors? Otherwise, we have an officer's recommendation.
Sorry, I just got one.
One question.
I've always got this concern about supporting vulnerable families, and that's sort of covered, I suspect, by 2. Would that be correct?
By number 1, by number 2, indirectly by number 5, and number 4.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ms Hamad.
Through you, Madam Mayor, if I can also just add to that.
Ms McGorry, yes?
I also believe that point 6, in terms of its link to our disability access plan that will be refreshed over the coming 12 months as part of the Local Government Act obligations, I believe this dovetails well with that as well.
Thank you. Councillor Copsey, you wanted to move
I wanted to move an alternate recommendation, actually.
Please state what the changes are.
So it's identical to the officer's recommendation, but
adds a 3.2.7, which reads, children will have access to natural environments which allow them to learn about and experience play in nature. This includes natural environments within early years services.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Baxter to second. Councillor Copsey, please speak to the motion. Councillor Bond, you have a clarifying question?
Just from the officers, let's say we've just built, or we have just built a new children's centre at the new school in Farrar Street, for example.
Yes.
What impact would this clause have on that particular facility? How would you see this clause change the way that facility would operate?
Thank you. Ms Hammond.
I'm not sure about Farrar Street specifically, but I can speak, sorry, through you, Madam Mayor, I can speak to 3.2.7. That was a policy objective that was also developed by the community because in 3 of the drop-in sessions and workshops that we held, those sessions were specifically for children, ages 3 and 4. And at Farrar Street, specifically, 10 out of 13 children said that their favourite place in the centre was outside. So it doesn't mean that we have to alter facilities per se, but it does mean that we need to take into consideration that children want to be outdoors and need access to outdoors.
Thank you. So Councillor Copsey has moved, Councillor Baxter has seconded. Councillor Copsey, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you to the officers and again, once again, to all the community members who have participated in what's been a really fantastic process to bring us to this point. Our Children's Services policy is hugely important. There is very little that we do as a council that impacts more on somebody's opportunities in life, I think, than the investment that we make and the engagement that we seek with people, with young children and with citizens of our city who are in the formative years of their lives. So it's hugely important. We've undertaken a series of workshops that have been really well attended and have provided a great depth of insight into what's sought from our Children's Services policy and have actually provided some fresh ideas and some insight that I think has been really welcomed by our officer team and by councillors, and we're very much appreciative of all the families and children who gave their time to help get us to this point. The officers have, I think, done quite a good job in synthesising those down to some broad principles that I think cover most of all of the points that have been raised and express them clearly and succinctly. In particular, I acknowledge that there has been strong feeling from our community that we need to provide for vulnerable children and families, and I do think that this is reflected and centred in the policy objectives that have been drafted. The reason I've sought to include point 7 is that I think that it was one of those fresh ideas that really did come through strongly from our community consultation, and I think that if we're going to strive to deliver children's services that are fit for purpose and that meet the needs of our community, this was one that was expressed really strongly by current users and future users of childcare, as well as families, and I think it's a really salient point to have in mind. To Councillor Bond's question, I don't think that point 7 necessarily intends that all childcare services or kinders would have an outdoor area. I think certainly that we've seen that expressed as a preference by a lot of families. So I do think that's important to take into account. But this is about having access to natural environments, and that could be achieved through programming as well if it's not feasible at particular sites. In my view, I'll leave it to officers to interpret and to families who I am sure will be
involved in the continued development of this policy. So thank you for everybody's input so far, and I hope the councillors will support this. I think it's reflective of the feedback we've received from the community.
Thank you, Councillor Copsey. Councillor Baxter.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Look, I'm happy to support this motion. As a parent of 2 kids, these policy objectives speak very much to me and my family, and I particularly want to sort of support number 7 there about access to natural environments. My son gets taken on little field trips to the St Kilda Botanic Gardens and things like that, and that's actually a really important part of his kinder experience, and not necessarily what happens within those 4 walls. So, and he loves it, and it's really important to have that. And I'd also point out that even in facilities such as the Farrar Street facility, Councillor Bond might recall that we're building a big park called Kirrip Park that's designed to provide access to nature for kids. It's like very close. So that's so you don't necessarily have to have it in your facility. If it's right across the road, that's also pretty good. And getting out there and being able to interact with nature is really important, increasingly so as we densify and have trouble with access to open space. We don't live in a time where we all have our own backyards and all that sort of stuff anymore. So we need to be able to make sure that kids are given as much access to what they need, which is outdoor play and in natural environments as possible. So very happy to support.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Simic.
I agree with, thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree with everything that's been said so far, so I won't go over the same points. I just wanted to say, though, that I'm hugely proud of the consultation we've done on this to date. It's been a little bit different to what we have done, the sort of consultation we've done in recent times. It's been a huge success. And it's led to a very good outcome, which we're discussing tonight as the next step. So thank you to the officers for bearing with that process, driving it and supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Simic. Would anyone else like to speak to this? I'll also add my 2 cents worth and just thank the community panel or reference group that I actually participated or saw in action a couple of times. They were incredibly engaged and knowledgeable. I'd like to also thank the volunteers that contributed to forming the policy objectives. I hope it is going to set us up for the future. That's the aim of this. I know the policy that we've got at the moment is out of date, needs a total rework. So we're right on the path of, I think, something great going forward for the future. I'd also like to thank the officers for all their work on this and look forward to all the work yet to come. Thank you. Councillor Copsey, would you like to close?
Just to add that I'm very pleased that Council's come to consider this item while Ms Jeffs is still with us, and thank you for all your work shepherding this policy to this point.
Thank you. Then I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay. Councillor Pearl can come back in. Thank you. And now we'll move to... so 10.2 is not happening. 12.1, yes. 2018-19 Visitor and Summer Management Program. And councillors, we don't have anyone that's requested to speak to this item. Do you have any questions of the officers? I do. I'm curious about the buggy and the additional vehicles for patrol. Will they be branded? And if so, how will they look to the community?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the buggy initiative that we trialled last year, we are purchasing as part of this year's program a buggy to use for the entire summer, based around the feedback we got from traders and community about its effectiveness to patrol and have a better presence along the beach. We will be having some sort of identification. We will have staff in uniform, so it's easy to identify it's Port Phillip people patrolling that, and we are planning to have some sort of branding on the vehicle itself, either Port Phillip logo or the campaign initiative that we come up for this year.
Thank you. Councillor Gross.
Get a lot of feedback about Catani, and I just wondered what this will mean for the ultimate allocation of Catani for private events.
Through you, Madam Mayor, Catani Gardens is quite a popular event destination based around its size. We have locked away our event calendar that is up on its website. We do include understanding those events and the impacts and other sort of visitation. So when events clash with warm weather days, we know visitation to our entire foreshore requires planning and activation. So we work across the organisation to really ensure there's some good planning around that, but we have locked away our major events calendar with events that are planned in Catani Gardens.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Any other questions, councillors? I have another one. I'm obviously quite keen to see our summer rangers have a bigger on-site presence. I think some of the feedback we got was about, well, last year while they were there, they weren't sort of seen. Just wondering if you can explain what the community will see down at the beach. Will there be a tent set up, for example, on South Beach Reserve to provide a constant visual presence, or what is it that the community will see apart from the buggies going up and down?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'll let David go through some of the other initiatives, but to highlight the program, we do try and clean up the mess and sort of have a quiet activation. So a lot of the work that we do in the summer management program does happen from a service perspective in the early hours of the morning when we try and clean up, but we are trying to have a more engaging focus with the summer rangers and some new initiatives that we're trialling this year, which David will go through.
Yes, so this year in terms of service levels, we'll see an increase. So we'll be investing, 1.1 million. All the signage along the foreshore will be updated, including the reserves leading onto the beach. So there'll be 50 additional signs on the grass reserves to the beach, and that'll include the glass and alcohol bans. Local laws will have a patrol buggy, as we spoke about. There'll be two additional part-time local laws officers out on patrol, and with their name on their backs. 2 additional part-time waste education officers. So the launch will most likely be on St Kilda Beach in combination with the traders, and they'll have a tent and so on set up. Most likely the rangers will be also engaged the length of the foreshore, so they'll be doing roving patrols. We'll have an increased social media monitoring. Additional litter pickers. We have a provision for a major clean. We're looking at a time-lapse camera to assist with crowd counts on South Beach, St Kilda. Additional park reserve cleaning. So this year it'll be starting from November 1st through to the 30th of April. In addition to that, also if the temperature's over 30 or if it's 20 overnight, we also just have to give notice. There'll be advertising with the alcohol ban over the Christmas period and New Year's throughout the whole city, and the comms material. So the rangers will be involved in getting that comms material out to the backpacker establishments, traders, liquor outlets, and posters and so on as well.
Thank you, Mr Hare. Any other questions, councillors? If not, we have an officer's recommendation. Do I have a mover for that or something different? Councillor Copsey to move, Councillor Gross to second. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Copsey?
We've spoken about these issues at length in the past, and it's just good to note the planning resources and commitment that Council has made to provide a safe and happy and hopefully less littered summer for residents and for visitors to our beautiful foreshore over summer.
Thank you. Councillor Gross?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Then I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried. Then I'll move on to 14.1, which is Microsoft licensing and services contract. Councillors, do you have any questions of the officers?
I'm happy to move it.
I have a question first, if I can. And my question is, does this contract contain any new products?
Through you, Madam Mayor, my understanding is the contract basically is a continuation of the suite of Microsoft products that we currently use in the organisation. So I can take the notice on question, but that's my the question on notice, but that's my understanding at this point in time.
Thank you. I have another question, which you might have to take on notice as well. Do you have any information available about what the percentage of the dollar figure is licence, and what percentage is support, and what percentage is training and associated services?
My understanding on the briefing I had with the respective manager this afternoon is that it's all licensing, but I can confirm that after this meeting.
Any other questions, councillors? If not, we've got an officer's recommendation. Do I have a mover for that or something different? Councillor Copsey to move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Gross to second. Would you like to speak? Councillor Gross, would you like to speak? Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Then I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Pearl, did you vote then? Yep, unanimously. I just want to check. Thank you. Now we'll move on to the proposed report of operations for the annual report 2017-18. Councillors, do you have any questions of the officers? I do. I would like to ask a question then on the bad and doubtful debts, please. Being extremely large. And if you could describe what's going on there, please, Mr. O'Keefe.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the bad and doubtful debts provision is a calculation that's carried out every year based on the ageing of the debt across the organisation at the close of the financial year. The increase that we've seen in the year for 30th of June 2018 predominantly relates to the fines and infringements area with respect to we've seen an ageing of the debt result from changes at Infringements Victoria. They've recently changed their technology platform, which has led to actually not only ourselves but several other councils seeing a significant deterioration in the debt, which obviously impacts cash flow. They are mitigating and remediating their technology issues. We expect the debt to be recoverable, but based on the strict interpretation of that provision at the 30th of June, it has led to an increase at the end of the year.
Thank you. Any other questions, councillors? Okay. Then we have an officer's recommendation. Do I have a mover for that or something different? Councillor Crawford to move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Pearl to second. Oh, sorry, Councillor Baxter. Would you like to speak to the motion? Councillor Pearl, would you like to speak to the motion? Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Then I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried.
I feel bad that no one spoke to it because it's a very important report.
It is very
That's all I was saying.
Okay. So then we'll move now to 14.3, which is the in-principle approval of the annual financial statements 2017-18 and the performance statement 2017-18. Councillors, do you have any questions of the officers? I would like to ask a question about what is our operating surplus, please, Mr O'Keefe. And while you're there, maybe our cash surplus as well, please.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the operating surplus for the City of Port Phillip for the year to June 2018 is just under $7.2 million. This compares to the previous year of $33.6 million. And the main difference between those two numbers, last year in that $33 million, we had $20 million of contributions, non-monetary contributions from relating to the Palais redevelopment and also the Stoke House redevelopment. Our cash surplus for the year to June, 30th June 2018, our cumulative cash surplus, I should say, is $2.6 million and reflects the strategies that Council has followed with respect to having a prudent and conservative financial strategy on behalf of the community.
Thank you for clarifying that. Councillor Copsey.
Just to follow up on that, Mr O'Keefe. So there was a statement made in this chamber earlier this evening that Council had already spent all of its surplus before the year began. Was that accurate?
Through you, Madam Mayor. I'm not sure with respect to the context of the question. What I can clarify is that the initial financial reports for the financial year 18-19 have not been prepared or brought to Council at this stage. That will be in the next Chief Executive's report, is my understanding. We typically do a soft close for the first month of the new financial year because we're finalising the audit process for the previous financial year. We'll have our first, I suppose I'll have my first eyes as CFO on the financial results for the first 2 months of the year early next week. With respect to, we would obviously, with the expenditure rate that we have in the City of Port Phillip, we would spend more than obviously $2.5 million in a week, basically. So in one context, yes, with the surplus that was there at the end of 30th of June of $2.6 million has been spent as part of the ongoing operations of the organisation. But at the same time, we're bringing in significant revenue streams through rates that have been paid and also the other income streams that we have. So if the councillor was willing to clarify the question in more detail, I might be able to provide a more clearer response.
Thank you.
Through
Mr.
you,
Carroll.
Madam Mayor, just my understanding of the commentary was around in the budget process, did we plan to spend all of our surplus? In the budget process, as in accordance with our financial strategy, we generally target a surplus of around $500,000 per annum, which was a 10-year financial strategy that Council has signed off on as part of the Council plan. This year, the budgeted surplus was around $350,000, and it's now come in at year end at around $2.6 million. Does that clarify the question?
Thank you very much. Any other questions, councillors? Then we have an officer's recommendation. Do I have a mover for that or something different? Councillor Simic to move. Councillor Baxter to second. Councillor Simic, would you like to speak to the motion?
Just to say that, again, this is a very important report and important consideration for us tonight. I believe that the information provided is of a really significant amount of detail, which makes it very easy for us as councillors to support the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I just want to endorse these reports and just note, how stupid would you have to feel as a councillor to lie about our budget position only to be proven wrong minutes later because we're talking about these very reports in the same meeting. So I guess I would just caution all councillors to please not misrepresent our financial position. It's actually really important that people know exactly where we are on these sorts of things, and that's the purpose of this reporting, not attempts by councillors to get elected.
Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Bond.
I'd caution councillors about understanding the difference between cash surplus and capital expenditure once that's taken into account.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bond. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Then I will as well. I'm very satisfied that Council can comfortably meet its short-term financial commitments. Expenditure in asset renewal has decreased in the last 12 months due to deferral of a few big projects, but this looks set to improve in the next 2 years. So given that I'm sort of signing this off, I feel like I've gone through it with a fairly fine tooth comb. One point that did interest me actually was the rates effort, so the rates compared to property values, and it did interest me that revenue divided by the capital improved value is the lowest it's been, and at 0.2% with a forecast of it going to 0.017 for the next 4 years. So actually people's rates have come down as opposed compared to their property value. So I thought that was an interesting stat to see in the report, so thank you for providing that information. Thank you for all the work that the officers have done in putting this out there. As I think it's good that we can comfortably have feel that the organisation's going very well. So, Councillor Copsey, would you like to close?
I'll just, thank the officers for all the work that goes into preparing these reports. They're thorough, they're part of our commitment to transparency and communication. There is plenty here for residents to sink their teeth into if they would like to interrogate the business of council, and I'd urge anyone who's still playing along at home to peruse these documents. They provide a very thorough picture of where council is at. Happy to support.
Thank you. Then I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Well done. Thank you. Looks like we're up to the notices of motion. Notice of motion. So, councillors, we've got one notice of motion from myself regarding a garden of remembrance. We have no members of the public that have requested to speak. But before I move this motion, I'd like to give councillors the opportunity to ask any questions. The officers have left, but you can ask me a question because I've been involved. Councillor Crawford.
So I have a couple of questions. So this extra money of $20,000 approximately, where is it coming? Like, it's not coming from, like, we don't have a fund for, I know we have, there's plaques and all that, so wondering whether it will just come from surplus, or is there an account that it can be taken from an area? And if we were to not fund the extra money, to what extent would the project be built, given they already have $30,000?
Councillor, would you like me to answer it? So there isn't any specific fund for this. It would have to come out of a surplus, and so that's why this is a notice of motion, in order for you to agree to that or not. And in terms of what might be delivered, it would largely go ahead as per the diagram, but there would only be room for 5 plaques, for example, and it wouldn't be able to meet the whole expectations of the project going forward. but it could be done in a stage project should the councillors not support this.
Sorry, can I follow up, Mayor? So what do you mean that 5, did you say 5 parts or 5
plaques?
Is it meant to be 5 of them? Or, sorry, I must have missed something. I thought it was just the one park that we were looking to fund. Plaque, just, not plaque. I was thinking, oh my God, didn't read the brief. So there's one plaque, but the extra funding will, why do we need 5?
There's probably a need for about 20 plaques, and each plaque actually represents and mentions an aspect of World War One. So, for example, it might talk about the home front, the women at the home front, be one plaque. Another plaque would be the Aboriginal component and their time in the war. Another plaque, so etc. So this would identify and talk about the whole of the war effort rather than just those, which is already recognised everywhere else, that went off to war. Does that answer your question? Okay, so if there are no more questions, I will move this notice of motion. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Copsey to second. Then I will speak to the motion. So, councillors, the World War I Committee has been meeting for 4 years now, since the start of the centenary commemorations, and this is a subcommittee of the Cultural Heritage Reference Group. This Cultural Heritage Reference Group subcommittee, being the World War I Centenary Community Reference Group, decided to get together to make sure that this was adequately recognised in our community. So we meet once a quarter over the last 4 years. We have put on numerous little events, most of them feeding back from the historical societies in order to recognise the World War I centenary, which comes to a culmination at the end of this year in November. So the one thing that the community did recognise that hasn't occurred was the whole of the war effort being recognised. So we spend a lot of time in the last 4 years recognising, the men and the women that went to war, but it's everything else that wasn't recognised. So they thought that it would be very nice to have a commemorative garden. There were many places that were looked at throughout the municipality, and after a lot of research and expert advice, the location came back to be along the Railways Reserve in Port Melbourne, which is proximate to where the piers are. This place is to have a minimal piece of infrastructure put there, a couple of seats, but mostly it's a place of contemplation and planting. We were not successful to get a grant from the state government, but were successful to get a federal government grant of $20,000. So we've fallen short of the actual project cost of $50,000. So that's why this notice of motion has come up tonight. The committee have pleaded with me numerous times, and I've agreed to put a notice of motion to you so that you could consider all the information and make a more informed decision than perhaps was done when we were considering the budget earlier this year. So this is will be a garden of reflection, for consideration and for contemplation. It will look at the global conflict through a personal and local prism, and it'll also provide a place for thinking about what is happening in our world now. It'll provide the community a place to consider the individual experiences and the collective stories which have shaped our understanding of the Great War, and provide opportunities for further reflection, engagement and interpretation of this war. The place will comprise of new tree plantings, interpretive plaques, an information panel and new seating around a central area. It'll also have an online component and will include information about the Great War and its impact in Port Phillip, and the only complete list within the municipality of those residents who lost their lives during the war. The local community members in the groups, as well as schools, can gather at the site for educational, commemorative and performative events. And this proposal has come about from our community, as I've mentioned. It's an idea to unite our municipality, and in this last year of commemorating the Great War. So it's to provide a place that represents not the glorification of war, but the stories of the people, our community whose lives were irreparably changed. And you have the pictures there of what it may look like. So, Councillor Copsey, would you like to speak?
As the bell tolls faithfully. Thank you for providing the further background information on this request that has come through. I am supportive of the motion that you've brought tonight. I note that this has come from a community group and been a community generated request. In particular, I think that it is important, as you've noted, that this garden is a place where we can reflect on the impact and loss that conflict causes for people at home and families and communities, no matter where they are in the world. And our community experienced suffering just as those on all sides did, and it is important to tell those stories. We must understand history, and we must understand the real impacts that conflict can create if we're to avoid those in future. It's not insignificant that we'll also be seeing great improvement, I think, to a fairly underutilised piece of open space, and I hope that people can come to this garden, should this be successful this evening, to reflect and find a place of sanctuary to contemplate the need to avoid future conflicts.
Thank you,
for bringing the motion.
Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Baxter.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to support the motion. I think that if you completely put aside the First World War, connotations and context of this whole thing, we're actually just talking about using some money to spruce up an underutilised open space to something that will be used by people in some way. And this is, I think, is actually a good way, but regardless of the use of it, it seems to me a good investment regardless. But certainly war is bloody awful. It's the worst thing that we humans have dreamt up to do to one another. And the First World War was the very beginning of this of a level of state-sponsored slaughter that sort of heralded the 20th century, killing each other in numbers and ways that had never been dreamed before. So, as someone who's studied this war, actually, I think it's quite important. In World War II, they had tanks and they had high mobility. They were able to quickly score victories, and while there were plenty of casualties, they didn't have to necessarily mow down hundreds of thousands of people to score those victories. In World War I, they didn't have that kind of mobility. They just shot at each other from trenches and died in the hundreds of thousands. This is the sort of thing that we shouldn't forget, because this is a war that had no glory whatsoever. People went to the trenches and died in the trenches, sent there by, their hires up, who often never had to visit them. So the kind of loss and the kind of impact that has on a society and how that scarred our society is something that we should think about. So I think it's important. It doesn't seem like a particularly large amount of money. We're pairing it with some other money that's come through there. I think it will end up with a nice outcome.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Pearl.
Thanks for bringing the motion, Councillor Voss. I don't support it. It's a small amount of money, that's true, but if we are spending this sort of money, I would prefer it to go to places like the Port Melbourne Lifesaving Clubs, whose toilet tiles are falling off the wall, of which we own that building, and they need their shower block replaced, or the Port Melbourne Netball Club, who are currently getting dressed in a tin shack, as I'll describe it, and this money would go a very long way with that. And we still don't have a firm design for Albert Reserve on Albert Road, which this money could potentially integrate a similar type of thing. You're sitting here with a much bigger budget and more physical open space. Railway Reserve is a very special place, and we haven't had a conversation about what the appropriate use of that reserve should be. It's Australia's first railway line, which ran 4 kilometres from the city, built in 1854. I think we should have a conversation about what is the appropriate use for that reserve more holistically before we start putting ad hoc reserves in it, because it's quite a long stretch of open space, and there's no more open space left in Port Melbourne unless we buy some more. That's not to take away from the tragedy of World War I, as detailed at the Shrine. 416,000 people enlisted, 60,000 died, and more tragically in some cases, 150,000 came home injured, and the dread and trauma those 150,000 people came back with is almost felt 3 generations down the line now. So I have sympathy for what you're trying to achieve, but I don't think we should be... We discussed this in the budget process and it wasn't supported. It's a small amount of money, but I think we need to have a more holistic conversation about that site. And I think at the moment there's better places to spend that money that could go a very long way, particularly with those 2 clubs which I just mentioned.
Thank you, Councillor Pearl. Anyone else like to speak? If not, then I will close. Councillor Pearl, I just wanted to correct you in terms of we didn't actually discuss this in the budget process at all. I left the room and it was decided. So that didn't actually occur in the budget process.
So we discussed it without you in the room. Is that correct summation of that?
I'm speaking, thank you, Councillor Pearl.
Is that correct?
What happened is I left the room to take a phone call and the decision was made. I don't know what was discussed, but I certainly don't believe it was discussed because no one knew what it was about.
Point of order, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Also, in terms of the taking away open space, that's not the proposal or the intention whatsoever. This is about putting in some seating and some plaques around the seating and additional planting along there, along the edge near the railway line, just to clarify. Also, as part of this process, I know a number of councillors have been quite interested in all the poppies that have been being crocheted and knitted at the moment as part of this. Each one of those poppies will be, there'll be 1 poppy for each fallen victim that went and didn't come home from the war. I believe it's 911, but it could be 711, I'm not exactly sure. And I just think that's as part of the process which we will have on Armistice Day in November. Those poppies will also be at this particular memorial event. If this is not supported tonight, it will still go ahead. It just won't be in the form that was originally envisaged by the community. So I'm not worried about that, I have to say, but it would be great if it was something more like that was envisaged rather than just a part of it. So with that, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? That motion has been lost. Thank you. Okay. Number 16, reports by council delegates. Councillors? Any reports? Okay, then urgent business. Sorry?
Can I just note that as the council delegate to the Metropolitan Transport Forum, the City of Port Phillip will be hosting one of the state election series transport forums by the Metropolitan Transport Forum. I believe it's the 13th of September. So the MTF has been hosting these around the state, and it's an opportunity for our community to come and ask questions of the state candidates for the seat of Albert Park, and we're pleased to be providing the opportunity for that to occur.
May I ask a question?
Thank you, Councillor Copsey. Councillor Gross?
Councillor Copsey, the MTF still meeting Wednesday night?
Yes, they are. In fact, I think they were meeting tonight. So Councillor Brand and I, who share that delegation, seldom attend the meetings in person. However, we meet with officers who then attend and provide reports back.
Any other reports? Thank you. Then urgent business, item 17. Does councillors have any urgent business? Items of urgent business? No, then we'll move to item 18, which is confidential matters. Councillors, we have 2 items which are confidential. The first item relates to the Metro Tunnel project, loss of revenue for on-street parking, and the second item relates to the Customer Experience Program Delivery Partner Contract Award. So I'll now call on a councillor to move that the meeting be closed to the members of the public to consider these 2 confidential items. Councillor Gross to move. Councillor Voss to second. I'll move that the meeting's been closed to members of the public in accordance with Section 89 2D and F of the Local Government Act 1989. I'll now put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried. Wait till the gallery has cleared and the door has closed.